Chapter 1. Hum, hum. 2 J-green rays of distortion scanned his entire body like ripples on water. After a long while, the rays retracted and the scan ended. With a crisp beep, the iron door opened automatically. The AI system's deep and cold voice immediately rang out in the room. Number 4033, authentication passed. This person, called number 4033, looked as if he had rolled around in the mud. His original appearance was completely unrecognizable, but judging from his small and frail body, he was basically a 10-year-old child. However, Vader didn't care at all whether this was a child or an adult. What he cared about was the tattered bundle that the child held tightly in front of his chest. The bundles were made of coarse, primitive leather and were now covered in dirt. The exchange center dealt with tens of thousands of such bundles every day. Every single one of them was related to the livelihood of these children for the day, as well as Vader and the others' daily exchange earnings. Soon, the child walked forward and placed the bundle on the workbench. A pile of small black stones fell out. They looked like stones, but in fact, they were faintly suffused with a dark gold luster. The appraiser did not hesitate and immediately put on his low-light glasses. Waves of light waves appeared on the lenses and scanned the stones. The crystal screen on the wall only took a few seconds to present the results in front of his eyes. Material, dark gold sand. Quantity, 23 grams. Purity, 36%. Exchange value, 78 points. Vader nodded, and the subtitles on the screen changed again. Nutrient supply, 50 points. Healing mixture, 125 points. Lifeblood mixture, 300 points. Steel mixture, 500 points. Looking at the row of prices, the child's expression changed. He hissed. The nutrient supply was only 24 points yesterday. How did it become 50 points today? According to yesterday's price, his 78 points of income could be exchanged for 3 nutrient supplies. Then he wouldn't starve tonight, tomorrow morning, and tomorrow afternoon. After another day of hard work, he would be able to find gold sand. Then he would have a hope of living again. But according to today's market, the nutrient supply he could only exchange for would last him until the next day. It was simply impossible in this place. Vader was a little annoyed by the child's roaring, but he still explained calmly. Yesterday is yesterday, and today is today. The market changes every day. This is the rule. You should understand. The child stood there in a daze for a long time. Then he put all the dark gold stones back into his bag and walked back to the door angrily. I'm not exchanging anymore. This action infuriated Vader, but he did not flare up. The exchange center had its own rules. Forcing workers to trade was prohibited, and the use of force was also prohibited. Vader slowly sat back on the sofa and lit up a cigarette with a gloomy expression. He reached out and pressed a button on the sofa. He believed that his subordinates outside would be able to understand his intentions through the signal. Outside the Iron Gate was a completely different world. The square was bustling with activity. At a glance, it was densely packed with people. Most of them were laborers who had returned from all over the mining area. Everyone was tightly hugging the leather bags in front of their chests. However, these people could not be called humans at all. Most of them were dressed in rags and were covered in dirt. Some of them did not even have any clothes on. They stood naked in the queue, craning their necks anxiously as they looked forward. Everyone was hoping that it would be their turn to enter as soon as possible. It was already evening and the sky was getting dark. The sooner they could exchange for the nutrient supply, the sooner they would be able to survive the night. When the child came out, Ding Ming was also waiting in the crowd. However, he was not in a hurry because he had already seen the fully armed mercenary, Sadler, on the steps above the Iron Gate. He was quietly putting his hand on his belt. Ding Ming was very calm in the face of this covert action. He knew that it was easy to enter the central gate, but difficult to leave. If you did not follow their orders, these mercenaries would not let you off easily. As expected, in the blink of an eye, a long black whip flew out from Sadler's waist like a venomous snake. It whistled sharply towards the child's back. The child seemed to have sensed that something was wrong behind him. However, just as he turned around, the whip swept across his hand as if it had grown eyes. Ding Ming saw it clearly. Not only was the whip fast, but it was also very accurate. The child did not even feel any pain. Blood had already splattered, and the white bones of his knuckles were exposed. Sadler's wrist shook again. Before the bag could fall to the ground, the whip had already broken it into pieces. The dark gold stones inside spilled out and scattered on the ground. Looking at them in the dark night, the stones looked like real gold, emitting golden sparks. Although this process was completed in the blink of an eye, it was like a fuse that lit up the temporarily shocked crowd. The surrounding laborers immediately rushed towards the sparks on the ground like a tide. They did not do it for anything else. They only wanted to snatch more loot from others, increasing their chances of survival as much as possible. No one cared whether the victim was a child or not, and no one cared whether the child was dead or alive. This was how this place was. As long as one could survive, anything could happen and anything could be done. Ding Meng sighed softly. He did not rush into the crowd to participate in the looting, nor did he pay attention to the injured child's condition. The surrounding people were like crazy beasts, desperately digging and clawing at the ground, afraid that they would miss even a small piece of dark gold stone. So, taking advantage of the chaos in the crowd, he quickly walked to the front of the line. On the stairs, Sadler had already put away his whip without batting an eyelid. He stared coldly at him and said sternly, "Next." Ding Meng hugged his bag tightly and quickly stood in front of the metal door. Two probes immediately poked out from the top of the metal door. Dark green rays quickly descended, twisting like electric currents as they rippled all over his body. This feeling made Ding Meng very uncomfortable, especially when the rays brushed past his exposed skin. He felt goosebumps all over his body. Although his skin was icy cold, the heat in his body suddenly rose. It was as if there was an incomparably hot flame in his chest that was about to leave his body. It made his eyes blur, and he staggered and almost lost his balance. Recently, this abnormal feeling had been appearing more and more frequently. He had always wondered if he had contracted some kind of disease. After all, in order to survive in this place, illness was not only a common occurrence, but if one fell sick, they would basically be in a state of waiting for death. This was because most laborers could only barely exchange their daily earnings for nutrient solutions. The price of a healing mixture was daunting. In his thoughts, the rays suddenly retracted. The crisp beep woke Ding Meng up. The metal door was already open, and the AI system's voice rang out. Number 8028, certification passed. Ding Meng did not think too much and strode in. This was the 42nd day he had been in this place. Chapter 2. When Ding Meng walked in, Vader's face actually revealed a rare trace of a gentle smile. Even the appraiser at the side looked at him with a trace of expectation in his eyes. "Looks like your harvest today isn't small," Vader asked thoughtfully as he stared at Ding Meng's bag. Ding Meng ignored him and walked straight to the workbench. From a bag, he took out a handful of small stones that sparkled like grains of rice and placed them on the workbench. The appraiser's eyes immediately widened. Based on his 3 years of experience working here, he could tell that this was a diamond, and a pretty good one at that. Although there were tens of thousands of workers in this place, what the people outside dug out every day was nothing more than gold sand and stone, crystal or rough embryo, and associated source. If they were lucky enough to dig out gold-containing shale, they would be considered quite lucky. Very few people could dig out diamonds, let alone diamonds of such good quality. As expected, the screen on the wall soon displayed the evaluation results. Material, diamond or quantity, 96 grams grade, C. Exchange value, 2,688 points. When the appraiser raised his head again, he looked at Ding Meng with an unconcealable look of astonishment. He knew very well what this exchange value meant. Even the pile of D-grade crystal source ores that Ding Meng had sent over yesterday was worth 644 points. Most of the laborers in the plaza outside were earning less than 200 points every day. Those who could earn more than 200 points could be counted on one's fingers. The appraiser's gaze couldn't help but fall to the side. At this moment, Vader had already stood up, the smile on his face growing wider. "Number 8208. If I remember correctly, your name seems to be Ding Ming, right? In this place, the workers' names were replaced by numbers. As the person in charge of the center, it was already commendable that Vader could remember his name. Ding Ming still didn't show much of an expression. He only replied indifferently, "Yes, sir." Vader walked up to him. "Congratulations, Ding Ming. You've broken our center's record. The exchange value for a single transaction is as high as 2,688 points, which is our highest record here. Feel free to exchange anything you want." Ding Ming did not stand on ceremony and immediately said to the appraiser, 20 nutrient supplies. According to today's exchange rate, 20 nutrient solutions were worth 1,000 points. Although the total price was shocking, it was enough to ensure that Ding Ming would not suffer from hunger for the next week. The so-called nutrient supply in this exchange center was not an injectable nutrient solution, but a transparent test tube. The blue liquid inside was a low-polymerized compressed energy mixture. It could be directly taken orally to maintain the various energy and vitamins that the human body needed every day. Now, the 10 test tubes were neatly placed in an exquisite iron box. The faint blue color was very moving. "I also want 6 healing mixtures," Ding Ming said again. The healing mixture was also not a highly condensed energy product. It could only be used to deal with minor illnesses such as colds, coughs, colds, and inflammation. Exchanging 6 bottles at once meant that the treatment would take 2 days, which meant that the patient had been sick for some time. "But you don't look sick." Vader's smile finally disappeared when he said this. Ding Ming seemed to know what he was suspecting, so he simply explained, "Number 2187 had been sick for 5 days. Vader frowned, as if trying hard to recall what number 2187 looked like. "You're friends with number 2187? Ding Ming's expression immediately turned cold. "I don't have any friends." Vader was very satisfied with this answer. In this place, people could die at any time, and it was not easy to stay alive. What friends, dignity, trust, and the like were more important than nutrient supplies. As for the legendary love, there were no female creatures in this place to speak of. "But you want the healing mixture," Vader retorted. Ding Ming said indifferently, "I don't mind not having it. But if number 2187 dies, it will be very difficult to find so many diamonds in the future." So this was the reason. Vader pondered for a while and said, "I agree to the exchange." Ding Ming immediately bowed his head. "Thank you, sir." After putting the 6 test tubes filled with green liquid into the metal box, Vader spoke again. "You spent a total of 1750 points. You still have 938 points left. What else do you need?" Ding Ming didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned his head to look at the appraiser beside him. The appraiser actually understood. "Sir Vader, Mr. Ding Ming, I'll continue working in the next room. You can continue chatting." It wasn't until the appraiser walked into spare room number 2 next door that Vader smiled meaningfully. "Since you're the Taba champion, I can make an exception this time. But your request must be within the scope of the base's principles before I agree." Ding Ming nodded and went straight to the point. "Sir, I've been feeling a little unwell recently. I need a medical pod to check my body." The base's medical pods were relatively advanced medical devices. In principle, they were only available to the mercenaries stationed in the area. Low-level laborers like Ding Ming and the others had no right to use them. This was also one of the rules of this place. Vader stared coldly at Ding Ming. "You know the rules here." "I know." Ding Ming's expression didn't change in the slightest. During this period of time, he had already figured out the big and small rules of this place, including some unspoken rules that couldn't be brought to the table. Suddenly, Vader realized that there was something extra in his palm. He spread it out and saw that it was actually a gemstone that emitted an amber luster. Its size was at least the size of a watch. Even though he had seen all kinds of rough diamond in the center, he couldn't help but be secretly surprised at this moment. This was because he knew that a diamond of this quality couldn't be simply evaluated by numerical values. Ding Ming still didn't show any expression. "I dug it up today. I'll give it to you, sir." Vader's gaze turned even colder. "Are you bribing me?" "You're wrong, sir." Ding Ming's cold tone suddenly had a trace of emotion. I just want to live. Vader was still staring at him closely. From the outside, Ding Meng didn't seem to be the tall type. On the contrary, his figure was somewhat thin and short. The laborers in this place toiled in the harsh mining areas and weathered areas all year round. Every day, they could only rely on 1 or 2 bottles of cheap nutrient solution to survive. Most of them were sallow and emaciated and looked malnourished. From the day they were sent here, their fates had already been decided. They would either struggle here or struggle until they finally died powerlessly. Therefore, the laborers in this place gradually transformed into 2 types of people. The first type became the wild beast that fought for other people's things in the plaza outside, and the second type became the lifeless, crippled people who waited for death. Vader carefully sized up Ding Meng. He suddenly realized that apart from the dirt on his face, Ding Meng's facial features could actually be considered regular. There was even a trace of sharpness amidst the regularity. Although his face was still somewhat immature, there was a kind of heroic spirit pulsating between his brows that others didn't possess. This was what a young man should look like. Which young man with vitality wouldn't be afraid of the sudden and unknown arrival of death? Vader suddenly lowered his head and reached out to press a few buttons on the wristwatch on his wrist. The sophisticated instrument immediately constructed a wide virtual screen between the two of them. Not only did it display Ding Meng's image and data, it also displayed his personal information. Name, Ding Meng. Age, 20. Serial number, F3-8028. Origin, Linda Department. Top 45, Planet of Thorns 88th Camp in F. Events, none. Ding Meng wasn't surprised by this at all. Instead, he calmly said, "Sir, I know you're also from Top 45. I also know that you still have a few months before your contract ends. If you accept my gift, not only will you be able to live on when you return to your hometown, you'll live a better life than I do. I don't ask for much. I just want to live on." His words were simple, but they revealed an incomparably resolute tone. Vader stared at him for a long while before finally nodding. "Come with me." Chapter 3. On the east side of the exchange hall, Vader pressed his palm against a crystal board that was as smooth as a mirror. After a few flashes of blue light, the alloy door in front of him immediately opened to 2 sides. This time, the AI system actually switched to a sweet female voice. Authentication successful. "Welcome back, Officer Vader. Have a pleasant night." Ding Meng suddenly let out a long sigh. He had imagined many things about the private lounge of these high-ranking mercenaries, but none of them were as unexpected as the one in front of him. This room didn't have the elegant and luxurious resting facilities that he had imagined, nor was it fully equipped with a dazzling array of weapons and technological devices. There was almost nothing in this place, not even a bed. Due to the material of the crystal board, the entire room was spotlessly white. When one walked in, they would feel as if they had walked into a completely enclosed subspace. However, Ding Meng's eyesight had always been good. He noticed that at the corners of the room on the east and west sides, there were white cabins that were filled with technological auras. They were completely integrated with the surrounding environment and would be hard to notice if one didn't look carefully. He didn't recognize the cabin on the east side, but it was similar to the cryogenic cabin used by spaceships during long-distance voyages. Once a person lay down in it, the cabin door would automatically close, and the person would be able to sleep for a long time inside. However, Ding Meng was certain that this was definitely not a cryogenic cabin, nor was it a bed. He had seen the cabin on the west side before. It was like a small coffee table with a transparent, ellipsoidal protective cover covering it. This was one of the more high-end, general-purpose medical cabins nowadays, the Guardian V, or the V Medical Cabin for short. This medical cabin could treat many serious diseases, including those famous chronic diseases in human history: rheumatoid arthritis, AIDS, cell mutations, neuronal atrophy, and so on. Other than that, this room was really empty. Ding Meng never imagined that Vader's private lounge would be so simple. It was so simple that it was almost crude. One had to know that although Vader wasn't the number 1 person in the base, he was still one of the commanders among the higher-ups. His status was far higher than that of ordinary mercenaries. It was hard to imagine that someone like Vader would live in such a monotonous and boring place. Of course, compared to the rest of the laborers outside, this place could be said to be heaven on earth. At this moment, Vader's hand was already pointing to the west. Go in. Ding Meng did not hesitate. He quickly got into the medical cabin and lay down. He knew that in this world where the environment was so harsh that he could die at any time, this machine was probably the only thing that could save his life. Under Vader's control, the protective cover of the V-shaped medical pod slowly closed and then slowly began to rotate. Dense white light spots were produced from within, sprinkling onto Ding Meng's body like rain. This was the healing energy produced by the medical pod. This kind of highly condensed and pure energy was far superior to those cheap healing mixtures. At the same time, another virtual screen shot out from Vader's wrist device, displaying the treatment information. Target status, weakened 43%. Target symptoms, dengue 11 variant HD type, infection degree 32%. Gram 23 generation CC type, infection degree 39%. If Ding Meng could see this information, it would be easy for him to understand why he felt sick. Simply put, dengue fever was caused by the bite of a mutated mosquito. If it was mild, it would cause a fever, and if it was severe, it would cause death from bleeding. The depths of the mining area were dark and damp, and mosquitoes were very easy to breed. Many laborers died from this strange disease. Gram was a type of corpse virus. People died in this place every day, and if one was not careful, they would be infected. However, Vader was not clear about this. He was somewhat moved. From Ding Meng's appearance, he did not look like a person whose weakened state had reached 43%. Furthermore, he was still able to sit up straight and speak with such vigor despite suffering from 2 serious diseases. From this, it could be seen that this young laborer called Ding Meng had quite a strong body. If Ding Meng was in a 100% healthy state, he would undoubtedly have the physical conditions to become an origin ability user. Vader was suddenly lost in thought. If he had a body like Ding Meng's when he was young, he would not have come to this damn place to accept missions and become a mercenary. While he was lost in thought, the voice of the medical cabin's AI system rang out. Treatment complete. Unknown symptoms detected. Unknown symptoms detected. Unknown symptoms? Vader was a little surprised. Looking at it from the screen, Ding Meng's virtual body was like a piece of paper that could be seen through. The virus on it was like a stain that was gradually dispelled by the healing energy. Originally, this piece of paper was already spotless, but now there was a flashing white dot on it. What was certain was that this was not an ordinary virus, but it was definitely not normal either. This was because from its position, it was located in the center of Ding Meng's brain. The human brain was an extremely complex, precise, and mysterious thing. For millions of years, no one had been able to study it thoroughly. Even with the development of the human world to this day, no one had been able to see through all its mysteries. However, one thing was certain, and that was that the human brain was like a precision instrument. Pulling one part would affect the rest of the body. It would not work if one part was missing, and it would not work if one part was added. Now, there was an abnormal symptom in the center of Ding Meng's brain. This really surprised Vader. Is it benign or malignant? Vader asked without batting an eyelid. The AI system's reply was rather mechanical. Unable to identify. Unable to identify. Vader took a deep breath. Is it an origin energy perception point? Unable to identify. Unable to identify. The AI system's reply was still mechanical. Vader immediately understood that there was definitely an abnormal problem with Ding Meng's body. If this abnormality was an origin energy perception point, then the V-shaped medical cabin would definitely be able to identify it. Since it wasn't, then there was only one possibility. Ding Meng had contracted an even stranger disease, and death was only a matter of time. Under such circumstances, he would only have a chance of surviving if he received treatment from an even more advanced medical device. The Marshal did have such a medical cabin, and it was also the only one in the base. However, Vader wasn't stupid enough to bring Ding Meng to see the Marshal. The marshal was the one who had set the rule of forbidding laborers from using medical facilities. If the marshal were to find out that Vader had privately received goods from laborers, then he would be in deep trouble. His diamond might be worthless here, but if he were to return his hometown, it would be priceless. It would be enough for him to live a good life for the rest of his life. As long as Ding Meng died, and no one knew about this transaction, then he would be able to sit back and relax. When he thought of this, Vader quickly turned off the wristwatch. The healing stars within the medical cabin gradually grew smaller and smaller until they completely disappeared. Only then did the protective cover slowly open, and Ding Meng, who had been in a deep sleep, finally opened his eyes. Vader walked forward and watched as Ding Meng emerged from the medical cabin. The smile on his face was filled with concern and gentleness. "How was it? Did you feel that this diamond flower was worth its weight in gold?" Ding Meng stood still and slowly raised his arms. Then, he made a gesture of expanding his chest. Only then did he look at Vader. "Thank you, sir, for your kind treatment. I feel much better." There was indeed some sincerity in his tone, because at this moment, he was certain that his body had completely recovered. If Sadler, who was outside, had launched a sneak attack from behind from 10 meters away, he definitely wouldn't have been caught off guard like that child. He was at least 60% sure that he would have been able to avoid that fatal whip. Vader smiled. "You're a lucky man. Go. I'll see you again at this time tomorrow. I hope you could surprise me again." "Yes, sir. Thank you again." Ding Meng lowered his head to express his gratitude. "If sir needs anything in the future, I'll definitely be at your service." As he watched Ding Meng's back disappear through the door, Vader smiled again. However, this time, it wasn't a gentle smile, but a sinister sneer. He couldn't wait for Ding Meng to come to his service, because he could already see the young man lying on the plaza, waiting for the surrounding beasts to come and snatch his bundle and trample on his corpse. In Vader's eyes, Ding Meng was already a dead man. Anyway, there were people dying here every day. No one would care if one more died, let alone a laborer who had died of serious disease. Sometimes, perhaps death was the best release, and living was a kind of pain. Chapter 4. When he walked out of the exchange center, Ding Meng felt his whole body brimming with energy. His body was unusually light, and not only was his mind clear, his vision seemed to have become clearer as well. Previously, when he was looking back at the gate, he could clearly see the faces of the 20 workers in front of him. Now, he could clearly see the faces of the 30 people in front of him. Ding Meng took a deep breath. The air in the square was even more stuffy, but his body and mind were much happier. However, this happiness quickly faded away after he walked a short distance away, because he saw the child. At this moment, the child was no longer that child. He had long turned into a mangled corpse. Looking at the wounds all over his body, the child did not die from Sadler's flying whip. Instead, he was trampled to death by the crowd when they were fighting over his dark gold stone. Countless people rushed over and trampled him to death. Not only was the dark gold, or that he had worked so hard to obtain, stolen, even after he died, the others did not let him go. This was because he was stripped naked from head to toe. It should be known that there were many people here who did not even have half a piece of clothing. At this moment, Sadler was instructing 2 mercenaries to move the corpse. Their method of handling the corpse was very straightforward, and that was to use a small construction truck to scoop up the lump of flesh and transport it to the outskirts of the base to throw it away. They did not even bother to bury it. The square was still bustling with activity, and the workers were still waiting. The lines had long been restored to order, but Ding Meng's heart was not as calm as it was before. He had already predicted that this child would be unlucky, but he did not expect it to be this unlucky. He was not angry, nor did he feel sad. Even though he had only been here for less than 2 months, he was already used to this kind of thing. He had seen Sadler's flying whip at least 10 times. That flying whip was fast and accurate, but that wasn't the scariest part. The truly powerful part was that the whip wasn't able to kill anyone, but it could also be retracted very calmly. The perfect control of strength and retraction was the most deadly part. Ding Meng was not a heartless person, But in a place like this, compassion would not only not help others, it could even harm oneself. So the most important thing right now was to survive. Not only did he have to survive, but others also had to rely on him to survive. Ding Ming was now waiting for him to get the healing mixture to save his life. If you walked south of the square, you would pass through a barren desert. After walking for about 20 minutes, you would arrive at a world of pure rocks. Densely packed rocks of all sizes piled up into grayish-brown hillsides. Under the night sky, they looked huge and ugly. If you stared at them for a long time, you would even feel that these hillsides were somewhat ferocious. They were like monsters with sharp teeth, as if they were going to swallow these workers in one bite. In fact, many laborers lived in the mouths of these monsters. Under some huge dry rocks at the bottom of the hill, the laborers dug pits. Although they were called pits, they looked more like basements. After working for a day and getting the nutrient solution, everyone fell asleep in the basements. It was strange. The base covered a large area, but it was very hot everywhere. Only these airless basements were cool at night. After a day of hard work, one could just lie down and fall asleep. Logically speaking, these basements were not waterproof at all. However, Ding Ming had never seen rain in this area. Strictly speaking, the entire base was always sunny. One had to know that in a very hot climate, wounds were the easiest to worsen. If it was light, it would become inflamed and suppurated. If it was serious, it would rot and fester. Little Four's wounds had already begun to rot. His back looked as if it had been cut open by a sharp blade. At first, the wound was just bleeding, but after a long period of not wearing any medicine, it had deteriorated to the point that a large part of his back was festering. The entire basements were filled with an indescribable stench. When Ding Ming came in, Little Four was lying on a rock, moaning. He could only lie on the rock, unable to lie down. There was no bed in the room. A bed was a luxury in this place. Every laborer had already mastered the skill of sleeping on the ground. There was no light in the room either. When night fell, the entire base was shrouded in eternal darkness except for the mercenary area in the plaza. However, in such a dark environment, Ding Ming walked to Little Four's side with ease. He quickly opened a vial of healing agent and poured it into Little Four's mouth. The effect of the healing agent was very obvious. In just a minute, Little Four's moaning stopped. He lay on the ground and fell into a deep sleep. The large piece of rotten flesh on his back was healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. It even seemed to be smoking. The stench in the room was immediately dispelled and replaced by a light fragrance. Seeing that Little Four's condition was effectively under control, Ding Ming let out a sigh of relief. Little Four was laborer F3-2187. On the first day Ding Ming arrived at this place, his situation was not much better than Little Four's. The supplies on the transport ship were extremely limited. Not everyone could get enough food. Therefore, when the transport ship landed in the plaza of the base, Ding Ming was already too hungry to walk. He was kicked into the sand by the mercenaries like a rubber ball and curled up in a ball. His fate should have been the same as that child's. He should have ended up as a corpse, waiting for the construction trucks to mercilessly shovel him away. Fortunately, he met Little Four. Little Four brought him to the basement and used the remaining half of the healing agent to save him. "What's your name?" Ding Ming asked. "I'm number 2187. Ding Ming said, "I'm asking for your name." "Me?" Little Four was a little confused. "You could just call me Little Four." "Little Four," Ding Ming frowned. "Don't you have a surname?" Little Four was even more confused. "Surname? I don't know what my surname is. Anyway, since I was born, people have called me Little Four. You could just call me number 2187. Ding Ming was speechless. He was still not used to using numbers to replace people's names. However, he also knew that names were given to people. Low-level laborers like them, from a certain point of view, were not even considered human. In this place, no one would treat them as human beings. The scariest thing was that sometimes they did not even treat themselves as human beings. The beasts in the plaza were an example. Since Little Four treated Ding Ming as a human being, Ding Ming would definitely help Little Four. This was his principle all along. Thinking of this, Ding Ming sighed softly. Days like these were really too hard. It was so hard that he did not dare to relax for even a moment. He had to be alert and alert at all times. He was still young, and he really did not want to die. In the darkness, Little Four's breathing gradually became even. It looked like he had fallen into a deep sleep. Only then did Ding Ming feel a trace of weariness. He couldn't help but lie down on the ground, preparing to end this tiring day. Just then, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his eyes. It was as if a needle had pierced into his bone marrow. The sharp and intense pain spread from his eyes to his entire body. Ding Ming even felt as if his soul was throbbing from the pain. That long-lost feeling appeared once again. It was as if a raging fire had ignited in his chest. What was different from before was that this fire seemed to be going straight for his head, as if it was going to explode his brain. What frightened him the most was that this time was different from before. In the past, it was just a blur in his eyes. But this time, he could not see anything. He was truly blind. What's going on? Didn't Vader say that he had cured me? I did recover, didn't I? Why is this happening? Chapter 5. Darkness. Eternal darkness. What kind of feeling would a person have if they knew that they would forever be in this absolute darkness? Would they feel despair or perseverance? In the darkness, Ding Ming clenched his teeth. Large beads of sweat dripped down his forehead. It was not that he had never experienced pain before. Strictly speaking, pain was just the reaction of the human body's neurons stimulating the brain. Once the brain exceeded its tolerance, the human body would collapse. In fact, what was more painful than pain was real fear. The fear of the unknown, the fear of death. Perhaps death itself was not scary. Ding Ming had heard people say that people were calm when they were about to die. Right now, he already had this feeling. The soul-piercing pain surged through his entire body like a great river, making him extremely uncomfortable. But after a while, the surging pain seemed to have lessened. His body also gradually became numb under the washing. After a long time, he slowly felt his body become light as a piece of paper. But at this time, his consciousness was exceptionally clear, even sharper than usual. Am I going to die? Ding Ming suddenly realized this. She really didn't expect death to be like this. She also didn't expect to die in such a place after walking all the way here. If one were to say that his pain was like a surging river, then the past was like a vast and mighty tide that he could not resist at all. Even though he was in the darkness, many people and many things still flashed past Ding Ming's eyes, and these were things that he would never be able to forget. Suddenly, his heart seemed to be touched by something. A voice shouted fiercely, "No, I can't die like this. I can't accept this. I want to stand up." With this thought, his whole spirit was lifted. At this moment, all the feelings disappeared in an instant. His vision returned to normal. Ding Ming could not believe what he saw next. There was light in this dark underground room. He was sure that his eyes were not playing tricks on him. It was real light. The fine sand on the ground, the lines on the rock wall, the dirt on the bag, and even the wound on Little Four's back could be seen clearly. The most surprising thing was that this time, his vision was clearer than when he came out of the exchange center. Ding Ming noticed that the festering wound on Little Four's back looked like a lump of rotten flesh, but in fact, the wound was like a honeycomb. It was a bit like a disease, like a rash, but the skin was constantly oozing out a fine layer of green liquid. It was impossible to see with the naked eye. What was going on? Ding Ming turned his head to look around, trying to find the source of the light, but the result disappointed him. There was no light source at all from the ceiling and outside the door. At this point, Ding Ming finally understood that it was very likely that his eyes had undergone some sort of mutation. The human era was not backward. The mysteries of the human body were gradually being explored. Mutation was not an unknown field, and there were many humans with supernatural abilities. Of course, it was impossible for such a person to appear in this place. For Ding Ming, such a person was too far away from him. They were simply people from different worlds. But at this moment, his eyes were undergoing such a strange change, and he could not explain it. The unexplainable thing was yet to come. When Ding Meng lowered his head, he was shocked to find that his body had become somewhat transparent. His vision could easily penetrate his skin, and then he could easily see every hair on his body, every pore, every blood vessel, and even the circulation of blood in his blood vessels could be clearly seen. What was going on? Ding Meng blinked his eyes hard. Suddenly, he found something even more strange. At the moment when he blinked, his vision did not close. Instead, it remained in the state of observation. Ding Meng simply closed his eyes. At this moment, he could still see his body, including the pores on the surface of his skin, the circulation of blood in his blood vessels, and the bone tissue wrapped in his muscles. This was not vision, nor was it observation. It was a strange kind of perception. This perception was not seen with the eyes, but with the mind. With a thought, he appeared behind Little Four. Unfortunately, he could not see through Little Four's skin and blood. With another thought, he walked out of the room. It was no longer night outside, but daytime. Strictly speaking, because of his vision, the whole world had become black and white. Ding Meng noticed that in the center of his vision, there was a very small white dot of light. This dot of light seemed to be the core locator of his ability. If Vader could share this vision, he would definitely recognize that this dot of light was the thing that the V-shaped medical pod could not recognize. It had moved from Ding Meng's brain to his eyes. Ding Meng turned his head and saw that his body was still lying on the sand in the room. His eyes were closed, and his fists were clenched. Obviously, he was still in the state of resisting the pain from before. Ding Meng was deeply shocked. He did not know why his body had undergone such a strange change, but he was certain that he had not triggered the origin energy perception point. He had heard of origin energy users before, but it was definitely not the case in front of him. It was also impossible that his soul had left his body, because the further away he was from his body, the less clear his perception was. Instead, it was gradually blurring. What kind of ability was this? Brother Ding, Brother Ding. A familiar voice woke him up. Ding Meng opened his eyes and found that he was still lying on the ground, but Xiao Xi's young face appeared in front of him. Ding Meng sat up abruptly. The pain of needles piercing his bone marrow had long disappeared. His whole body was full of vitality, just like when he had just woken up from the medical pod. However, his surroundings had returned to darkness. Was what happened just now a dream? No, the dot of light in his vision was still there. This was not a dream. Ding Meng closed his eyes again and focused his mind. With a thought, his black and white vision appeared again. It was very clear, very clear. Brother Ding, are you okay? Xiao Xi shook his arm. Ding Meng opened his eyes and stopped observing. When he saw Xiao Xi's face, he could not help but feel warm in his heart. Xiao Xi, I'm fine. Xiao Xi's face was full of worry. Brother Ding, you've been sleeping for a long time. I thought you were sick. At the mention of the word sick, Ding Meng's heart sank. Xiao Xi, why haven't you recovered yet? I'm fine, Brother Ding. I feel much better. Xiao Xi was already able to stand up. Logically speaking, the medicine should have cured him. Xiao Xi's wound was just inflamed and suppurated. It had festered because it had been delayed for a few days. Although the medicine was a low-end energy medicine with low polymerization, the treatment was really child's play. If this had happened a day ago, Ding Meng would have thought that Xiao Xi had almost recovered. At the very least, he could stand up and jump around. He did not seem to be in as much pain as yesterday. However, under Ding Meng's unique perception, even if Xiao Xi wore coarse clothes, he could not avoid being scanned by Ding Meng's eyes. The rotten flesh on Xiao Xi's back had indeed been removed, but the honeycomb-like skin was still there. Although the green liquid was no longer oozing out, the situation was even more horrifying. The green liquid seemed to have merged with the blood, and it was slowly spreading on Xiao Xi's back. From what Ding Meng could see, the green blood was concentrated behind the honeycomb. Like a seed, it was taking root and sprouting in all directions. Based on Ding Meng's past experience, this was definitely not an ordinary disease, and it was definitely not an ordinary poison. For a moment, his face looked very ugly. Xiao Xi, tell me honestly, how did the wound on your back come about? Chapter 6. Coming out of the underground living area of the laborers, the base's workstation was just south of the hillside. The so-called workstation was actually 4 simple cement buildings that formed square. This square was bigger than the mercenary square in the center of the base. Every morning, countless laborers would come from the residential area and take the unmanned transport vehicles of the workstation to the main mining area 50 kilometers away for a day of work. The transport vehicles were naturally managed by the mercenary group, and the ride was not free. A single ride would cost 5 exchange points. For the laborers, if there was no harvest for the day, not only would they not return from this trip, but they would also lose everything. The main mining area was located in a sandy land that looked like a huge sinkhole. Countless laborers started from the bottom of the sinkhole and put the sand and stones they dug into sacks. They waded through the muddy water from bottom to top until they reached the top of the sinkhole. Then they poured the sacks into a basin of water and sifted the sand and stones over and over again. If they were lucky, they could find dark gold stones. If they were especially lucky, they could find golden sand and return directly. Most of the laborers working here were old laborers and children like the child. Most of them wore ragged clothes and were covered in dirt. Long hours of work also made these people hunchbacked. Looking from afar, this sinkhole was like ants moving up and down, densely wriggling together. People with trypophobia would feel that this place was as terrifying as hell. This was because this was not a simple labor. Robberies could happen at any time, killings could happen at any time, mining disasters could happen at any time, irregular plagues and unknown diseases could happen at any time. All of these made the lives of the people here as insignificant as ants, or even worse than ants. Living in this place was indeed no different from living in hell. It was just that this place was hell in the eyes of the laborers, but heaven in the eyes of the mercenaries. These laborers excavated huge wealth for them day and night. This was because no matter which era it was in, gold and diamonds would always be luxuries and symbols of wealth. It was strange to say that things like diamonds were composed of pure carbon, but their rarity was more expensive than today's energy crystals. After all, these sand and stone or embryos were repeatedly smelted, extracted, and processed, and eventually became elegant, luxurious, and exquisite jewelry. Then one day, one of them would definitely appear in a so-called high-end place where celebrities gathered and be hung on a woman's body. She would naturally become the focus of attention because she knew that she was the most beautiful woman tonight. Perhaps there was one thing she didn't know. Behind her luxurious and precious jewelry, behind her alluring beauty, were countless lives, countless tears, and countless tragic stories. This world was so strange. The more beautiful and brilliant it was, the uglier and dirtier it was. The sinkhole was only the periphery of the main mining area. The workers were only carrying out simple backpacking and screening. From the bottom of the sinkhole down, 3 lifts transported the young and strong workers underground. This was the main battlefield of the excavation. Crisscrossing paths were densely packed in the underground world like the capillaries of a human body. These were all excavated by countless laborers using the most primitive tools. Anything that was excavated underground could be brought back to the exchange center and be exchanged for value. Most of the materials here were in batches of energy crystals, and their value was much higher than the residues in the periphery. Therefore, the underground world was often full of disputes. This group of laborers could be one group of people, and another group of laborers could be another group of people. Different groups of people had their own territories, and it was almost impossible for a single laborer to work here alone. Ding Meng and Little Four belonged to the group of people with the most power in the underground world. The leader was nicknamed Machine Gun. According to Little Four's introduction, Machine Gun had worked here for about 6 years and was very familiar with the complicated terrain below. Where were the mines? Where were the pools of water? Where were the tunnels that collapsed easily? Where were the branches and main roads? Machine Gun was as familiar with the structure of his own body. However, Machine Gun was not an easygoing person. In the area under his jurisdiction, every laborer had to show some respect to him before they were allowed to enter. If the Supreme Commander was the most important person in the surface base, then Machine Gun was the real boss of the underground world. Ding Meng was very impressed by this. He was not impressed by Machine Gun's ability to be the boss of this place, but he was impressed by Machine Gun's patience. If he had to live in this hellish environment for 6 years, he would have gone crazy long ago. In the dark and dreary underground tunnel, Machine Gun was standing on a suspension steel bridge. He looked like an iron tower on the bridge. His whole body was sturdy and strong, and his waving arms were powerful. With a fierce face, one could tell that he was a ruthless and cruel guy. However, Ding Meng and Little Four had to cross this bridge. On the other side of the bridge was a recently discovered treasure mine. It was said that someone had found a colorful diamond the size of Cat's eye. Of course, if Ding Meng could see Machine Gun could also see them easily. Little Four, aren't you sick? How did you recover so quickly? Machine Gun was not like Vader. The word suspicion was written all over his face at all times, and his questions were quite sophisticated. Not only did it show that he was very familiar with the flow of people in this place, but he was also testing the speed of Little Four's recovery. To put it bluntly, Little Four must have gotten the healing agent at the exchange center. In this place, people fought tooth and nail for 1 or 2 bottles of nutrient solution every day, but Little Four was able to get it so easily. This meant that there were a lot of things to be found in the newly developed PC-35 area. Little Four obviously did not have such a deep mind. In the face of Machine Gun, he could only nod and bow. It's all thanks to Brother Ding. It's all thanks to Brother Ding. Ding Meng sighed inwardly. Little Four was still too honest. Just a simple sentence from someone else, and he couldn't keep his cool. However, it was useless to sigh now. Machine Gun's hand was almost stretched out to his face. Ding Meng also knew that once this hand was stretched out, it would rarely return empty-handed. If he returned empty-handed, he would make it impossible for him to return even if he wanted to. However, when he thought of the strange injury on Little Four's back, Ding Meng secretly gritted his teeth. He took out a green test tube from the bag at his waist and handed it to Machine Gun. Naturally, this was the healing agent. Machine Gun held in his hand, tossed it, and shook it. Only then did he reveal a satisfied smile. "Newcomer, you're quite good. You haven't used it before." Ding Meng said indifferently. "It's all thanks to Boss Machine Gun." Machine Gun waved his hand. "Go in. If anyone dares to cause trouble for you too, break their legs. Tell them that this is what Machine Gun said." Ding Meng and Little Four quickly thanked him. "Thank you, Big Brother Machine Gun." As he watched the two of them walk side by side into the distance, Machine Gun's smile suddenly disappeared. He shouted coldly, "Leopard!" As soon as he finished speaking, a person flashed out of the darkness like a shadow. He was like a ghost on the cable bridge. Brother Machine Gun. The burly man called Leopard appeared very respectful in front of Machine Gun. Machine Gun said, "Keep an eye on these 2 kids and see which passage they went to. If you find anything new, come back and report quickly." "Yes." Leopard's body floated to the other end of the bridge like a shadow. Chapter 7. In the wet tunnel of the mining area, Ding Meng and Little Four struggled to move forward in the mud. They did not know how many tunnels they had taken and how many holes they had drilled. The two of them looked at each other in silence. As the air in the tunnel became colder and colder, Little Four finally felt the itch on his back. The wound seemed to have festered again. He could even feel the sticky pus on his skin and clothes. His whole body began to feel weak again. At that moment, Ding Meng reached out his hand from the side. At the same time, he handed over a healing potion. "Let's rest for a while before we continue," Ding Meng said calmly as he placed the soldier's shovel on the ground. Little Four looked at him gratefully. "Brother Ding, thank you so much." Ding Meng shook his head. "It's too early to thank me. Now you believe me. The healing potion on your back can't cure it." Little Four opened the bottle and swallowed it. He panted and said, "I feel it too. The healing potion can barely stop it from worsening." Ding Meng was silent for a while. Then he said, "In my opinion, I'm afraid the blood generator won't work either." Little Four naturally knew what he meant. If he wanted to truly cure the strange wound on his back, perhaps only the medical cabin could do it. If he wanted to use the medical cabin, he could only use the old method, find Vader. And if he wanted to move Vader, he would need more diamonds, and they could not be of ordinary quality. So, the two of them found their way to this place. Ding Ming had dug up the amber diamond at the end of this remote tunnel yesterday. Little Four had told him about this place, but Little Four was silent now. He reached into his pocket and took out a brown bracelet. Ding Ming was familiar with this habit of his. Whenever he was nervous or had something on his mind, Little Four would lower his head and silently play with the beads on the bracelet. He did not know where he got the bracelet. "Brother Ding, have you been to the edge of the base?" Little Four suddenly asked. In fact, this question had puzzled Ding Ming for a long time. From the first day he arrived, the mercenaries of the surprise attack mercenary group had warned him that no one was allowed to leave the base, including the members of the mercenary group. What was the world outside the base like? Ding Ming was also very curious. However, almost no one knew about this place. According to some of the laborers who had been to the edge of the base was surrounded by tall walls that were about 40 to 50 meters high. There were a lot of weapons systems and defense facilities on top of the walls. In other words, the entire black gold base was surrounded by a wall. If the entrance to the main mining area was at the center, then the entire base covered an area of at least hundreds of square kilometers. Such a large mining area was reasonable, but what about the outside? What was the outside world? Ding Ming also had a vague feeling that this base was very likely located on some remote planet, because laborers like them, who were considered inferior, were often sent to those remote areas with harsh environments by the refugee camps. This was all normal logic, but why did Little Four suddenly mention this? Xiao Si looked as if he had made up his mind. After a long time, he stood up and said, "Brother Ding, come with me." Ding Ming immediately understood that what Little Four was about to tell him must have something to do with some mysterious places in the base. Under an inconspicuous corner of a huge rock in the tunnel, Little Four was digging hard with a shovel. Generally speaking, experienced laborers should not work in such a place. They would not be able to dig out anything good. Ding Ming also knew this, but he also knew that Little Four must have done this for a reason. As expected, after digging for a long time, there was a sudden crashing sound. The wall of the tunnel collapsed slightly, revealing a half-meter-tall hole. "Brother Ding, come in quickly." Little Four climbed in first. Ding Ming did not hesitate. He quickly rolled on the ground and directly rolled into the hole. After Little Four entered the hole, he did not turn around. Instead, he dug for a while and used a pile of sand and stones to block the hole again. Ding Ming could not help but nod in appreciation. Although Little Four's body was weak, he was still very cautious. They had to be careful no matter where they were in the base. Carelessness often led to either death or eternal damnation. After the hole was blocked, even if someone outside the tunnel found a sand pile under the huge rock, they would not think that it was a good idea to continue digging there. Even if an expert found some clues, it would at least prolong the time for them to be discovered. During this time, they could be one step ahead of the others and find something good. There was indeed a different world inside the cave. After Ding Ming adjusted the searchlight above his head to the brightest, he found that it was a spherical cave. The space was about the size of dozens of basement rooms in the residential area. Cold water constantly seeped out of the walls of the cave, and the entire cave seemed to be raining. That was normal. The environment of the underground mine was like that. However, the strange thing was that the spherical cave was too smooth. It was as if it was supported by some kind of energy field. The walls of the cave were as smooth as a mirror. There was not even a trace of texture. The most important thing was that the walls of the cave were covered with dark green moss. Then, Ding Ming was really surprised. Other than the man-made buildings in the base, the rest of the place was a withered desert. There was no life to speak of. However, there were plants growing in the depths of the underground world. That meant that there was life in this place. What was this place? Ding Ming turned his head and glanced at Little Four. Little Four's expression had calmed down. "Brother Ding, I have calculated that we are now at the edge of the base." Ding Ming knew that he was not talking nonsense. Little Four had been in the base for several years. His understanding of the underground world was no less than that of a machine gun. Otherwise, with his weak and thin body, he would not have been able to survive in the mine for so many years. "Brother Ding, look over there," Little Four said again. Looking in the direction of his finger, Ding Meng found that the farthest wall in front of him seemed to have cracked. There were stairs extending upward from the crack to the unknown depths of the darkness. Ding Meng said in a deep voice, "Maybe those stairs can lead to the outside of the base." There was a hint of excitement in his usually calm voice. Little Four could understand Ding Meng's thoughts. Many people had already given up hope when they were sent to the Black Gold base. This was the fate of the inferior people after they became laborers. They would spend the rest of their lives in this hellish place. It was good to survive, but what was the difference between living like this and dying? It was better to find a reason to die. Now, there was a path to the outside world. Whether it was hell or heaven, everyone had at least a glimmer of hope. That hope was that through this path, they might be able to get rid of the prison that was the base. If they were lucky, they might even be able to get rid of the identity of a laborer. In some people's hearts, perhaps freedom was the most important thing. It was more important than anything else, even more important than their own lives. Ding Meng was about to step forward, but Little Four pulled him back. "Wait, Brother Ding." Ding Meng asked curiously, "What's wrong?" Little Four pointed at the pool, not far away. "You can't cross it." Ding Meng's face darkened. "What's going on?" "Watch." Little Four picked up a fist-sized stone and threw it into the pool. Plop! The stone splashed a large amount of water. However, the pool didn't calm down. Instead, a large string of bubbles emerged from the bottom of the pool. It seemed like something was about to drill out from the bottom of the pool. Ding Meng immediately raised the shovel. His whole body was on alert. Chapter 8. More and more bubbles appeared, and the movement on the surface of the water became louder and louder. The pool was like a pot of water that was about to boil. The mysterious thing had not yet appeared, but the situation was already very serious. At this moment, Ding Meng suddenly felt a chill go deep into his bones, and all the hair on his body stood on end. This was his natural instinct, and he knew that a great danger was about to befall him in the next moment. "Xiaoxi, back off!" Ding Meng shouted, and the military shovel in his hand had already been swung out. Xiaoxi did not have time to back off, and he did not even see how Ding Meng had made his move. He only saw a flash of sparks in the air, and then there was a ding sound as if two sharp weapons had collided in the air. The force behind the collision was astonishing. When he took a second step back, two more sparks flashed, and the two clanging sounds made his eardrums go numb. This time, he saw clearly that Ding Meng seemed to have used the shovel to strike something back. At the same time, Ding Meng was knocked back by that thing. Xiaoxi was so shocked that he could not speak. This was the first time he had seen Ding Meng make a move. Ding Meng's reaction was fast, and his strength was strong. It seemed that he was not inferior to Sadler. Such a person was actually inferior. He was actually sent to this place to do manual labor. For a moment, he was very curious about Ding Meng. The machine gun was also very powerful, but he had heard that the machine gun used to be a fugitive, so it was reasonable for him to be strong. But what about Ding Meng? What did he used to do? But there was no time to think about these questions. Xiaoxi asked, "What was that thing? What was that thing?" Ding Meng could not describe it to him at all. At that moment, a black tentacle shot out of the pool, and at the tip of the tentacle was a ghost face that looked like a crab's body. If a normal person had seen this scene, they would have been scared out of their wits. When the tentacle swept over, two hook-like bone spurs suddenly shot out from the two sides of the ghost face and came at him at an extremely fast speed. If he had not been so focused, he had no doubt that this attack would have directly pierced through his head. However, the monster had missed its target twice in a row. Under the illumination of the searchlight, it wriggled back into the water. "You were scratched by this thing?" Ding Meng asked in a low voice. In the exchange just now, he saw clearly that Ghostface Mask's bone spikes were like two sharp weapons. The tip of the spikes glowed with a faint green color. The color was exactly the same as the green liquid on Little Four's back. Little Four nodded grimly. A week ago, he had accidentally stumbled into this place. It was when he was preparing to wade through the pool that he was suddenly attacked by this monster. He didn't have much fighting ability, but living in the base for a long time had made him develop a good habit of staying alert. He wasn't good at fighting, but running for his life wasn't a problem. However, he was still a little too slow in dodging. The tip of the bone spike cut through the skin on his back, and he fell unconscious for a few days after returning to the surface. Ding Ming stared at the surface of the water. This thing seems to be afraid of light. He actually had a point. The workers all wore searchlights on their heads, so wherever they looked, the searchlights would shine. When the ghost face mask appeared, the searchlights shone on its face. Then, the ghost face mask changed its direction and twisted its body to evade the searchlights at an incredible speed. If this had happened a day ago, Ding Ming would have been lying on the ground by now. However, at this critical moment, he didn't forget about his new ability. He quickly activated his unique vision. Strictly speaking, this vision was like another pair of eyes for Ding Ming. It allowed him to observe his opponent from another angle. That was why he was able to guess that the monster was afraid of light and was able to face the attack head-on. This new ability had something to do with it. Of course, the base also played a part in this. The base exploited the workers in every way possible. Perhaps it was because they hoped that the workers would be able to excavate for a long time and at high intensity. Therefore, the excavating equipment that was exchanged for the workers was surprisingly high quality. This shovel was made of high-strength binary alloy. After a long period of excavation, the tip of the shovel had been sharpened to the point that it was as sharp as a sword. It was no problem for it to be used in battle. If this shovel was also a low-end product like the nutrient solution, Ding Ming would probably have been crushed by the ghost face mask. Xiao Si, turn off the searchlights, Ding Ming said coldly. Xiao Si looked at him in horror. Brother Ding, if I say turn them off, then turn them off. Ding Ming interrupted him sternly. His gaze was resolute as he looked forward. If we don't kill it, we won't be able to get through. Xiao Si was stunned for a moment. He looked at Ding Ming's determined face and could not help but sigh. In the end, he silently turned off the searchlights above his head. As expected, once the cave returned to the suffocating darkness, the surface of the water exploded and the ghost face mask came out again. If Xiao Si could see in the dark, he would probably be scared silly by Ding Ming's next move. Because this time, Ding Ming chose the most unexpected way. He charged straight at the ghost face mask. If a person wanted to live, the best defense was to attack. Sitting and waiting for death would always be passive. This time, a series of sparks burst out in the darkness. Ding 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 sounds rang out incessantly. The ghost face was like a venomous snake tearing at Ding Ming's flesh. Every time the bone spears came from a strange angle, Ding Ming's shovel would always be able to deflect them at the right spot, and his momentum did not decrease at all. Another splash was heard. The surface of the water split open again, and a huge figure stood up. It was an ostrich-like creature. The black tentacles grew out from its back. Its huge body had been hiding under the water until Ding Ming came close. Only then did it reveal its true body. Unfortunately, it did not know that Ding Ming had already seen its true body. So when the ghost face mask came crashing down, Ding Ming used the momentum of the charge to slide forward and slid between its legs. Following, that was the shovel. The sharp edge of the shovel drew a beautiful straight line in the dark. This breathtaking attack was completed in just 2 seconds. It was not until Ding Ming slid far away that the tentacles suddenly stiffened. The ghost face mask let out an unbearable cry. The sound was so distorted that it sounded like the cry of a demon from hell. Little Four could not help but cover his ears. The ostrich's body kept trembling in the middle of the pool. After turning on the searchlight again, Little Four could see clearly that the moment Ding Ming slid over, the soldier's shovel had cut open the ostrich's lower abdomen. Countless amounts of green liquid poured out, dyeing the pool green. It was not until the ostrich's body completely collapsed and floated weakly on the surface of the water that Little Four spoke in a trembling voice. "It's dead?" Ding Ming had already reached the other side of the pool and was waving at him. "Come here." Little Four did not dare to swim across the middle of the pool. The water in the middle of the pool had turned completely green, like a strange poisonous flower, quietly blooming in this terrifying cave. Chapter 9. It was a quiet cave with eerie cracks. As soon as Ding Meng stepped on the stairs, a chilly wind blew from the depths of the darkness. Ding Meng didn't know why, but he suddenly had a strange feeling. This place seemed familiar, as if he had been here before, but he couldn't remember when it was. In such a strange and mysterious place, unknown dangers could emerge at any time. He should be on high alert, but Ding Meng was not in such a state. He felt as if there was something waiting for him in front of him, as if there was something in the dark that led him here. Suddenly, his eyes blurred again, and his vision became slightly blurry. The strange symptoms appeared again, but this time it was not his eyes that hurt. The pain came from his palms. "Brother Ding, what's wrong?" Xiao Si, who was next to him, noticed that something was wrong with Ding Meng. He was supporting himself against the cave wall, and he looked a little weak. "I'm fine." Ding Meng waved his hand. "Maybe I used too much strength just now. I'm a little tired." Xiao Si agreed. Although he did not know how to fight, he knew that it was inevitable for people to be tired after strenuous exercise. Although Ding Meng had only been fighting for 1 or 2 minutes, he had used up much more energy than an ordinary person. However, Xiao Si could never figure out the real reason. In the darkness, Ding Meng quietly opened his left palm. There was a tiny green dot in the center of his palm. If one looked closely, they would find that its shape was similar to the green poisonous flower in the center of the pool. The moment Ding Meng cut open the water monster's belly, some of the venom still fell into his hand. This really couldn't be blamed on his carelessness. After all, he was just an ordinary person. He didn't have the protective equipment of a mercenary from head to toe, nor did he have the extraordinary abilities of an origin ability user. In order to kill the water monster in one blow, he had already used up all his strength. At this moment, Ding Meng knew that he had been poisoned by the same poison as Little Four. Although it seemed like a small amount of poison, it was actually extremely potent. Through his palm, he could feel that the poison was slowly consuming his physical strength bit by bit. From time to time, he would feel weak and dizzy. If he were to turn around and return to the surface now, relying on those few healing potions, he would only be waiting for death. If he continued to move forward, he might have a chance of survival. Since there were plants growing in this godforsaken place, if he could find some exotic flowers and herbs, he would be saved. The stairs were slanted upwards, and after walking for an unknown amount of time, they finally reached the end. However, what appeared in front of them was a dead wall. Is there no other way? Little Four was a little disappointed. No. Ding Meng stared at the dead wall. Little Four's eyes suddenly lit up. Although the walls of the cave were also cold and damp, upon closer inspection, it was actually covered in a thick layer of moss. It was clearly different from other places. The two of them went forward without saying a word. The soldiers used their shovels to dig and scrape at the wall. After a moment, Little Four's heart finally started pounding. This place that looked like a dead wall was actually a circular metal door. Judging from the rust on the door, it was unknown how many years this door had been eroded by the passage of time. Why was there a metal door underground? Was this some kind of secret base? Or was it some kind of secret treasure? Why was it buried so deep in the underground world? Ding Meng looked at the circular door with a thoughtful expression. How long has the Raider mercenary group been stationed here? Little Four seemed to have woken up from a dream when he heard that. They were already here when I came here 3 years ago. According to Machine Gun, the Raider mercenary group had been here for more than a decade. Ding Meng frowned and said, "They've been mining in this place for more than a decade?" Little Four said, "I think so." Ding Meng suddenly exhaled. The thing that they want to mine is most likely behind this door. What he said was very confusing. With the size of the mining area, it would be more efficient, faster, and reasonable to use slightly more advanced AI robots. Even if it was unreasonable, it would not take more than a decade to mine. Although the mercenary group could not be compared to large corporations, at least they had the financial resources to buy mining robots. Why would Black Gold Base use such a primitive method of mining? Ding Ming could not figure out the reason behind it. If he could not figure it out, then he should not think about it. There were many things that could not be solved by thinking about it. Ding Ming was about to step forward, but he was pulled back by Little Four again. Little Four looked at the circular door with a trace of worry in his eyes. He seemed to see some kind of ominous disaster coming out from behind the door. Brother Ding, should we go back? If we keep going, I'm afraid we won't be able to handle it. Ding Ming sighed slightly. He could understand Little Four's worry. A person who was regarded as an inferior race was sent to a remote and harsh place to become a laborer. No matter who it was, after a few years of living cautiously like Little Four, they would become a creature called a rat. Everyone hated rats because rats could eat, steal, and rob. But rats were even better at running away. Rats were perhaps the best animals in the world at running away. As long as there was the slightest sign that something was wrong, the rats would run away. Every laborer in the base was in danger. Whether it was danger or temptation, the most important thing was to try their best to survive. Nothing else was so important. However, Ding Ming was not such a person. He felt his palm twitch again. When he opened his hand, he saw that the little bit of green had grown to the size of a broad bean. This damn green liquid was like a poisonous seed that was taking root and sprouting in his hand. This time, Ding Ming ignored Little Four. He took a big step forward and kicked the round door. The door, which was as rusty as a wooden board, immediately collapsed like mud. With a loud whoosh, a wave of heat surged out from the door, accompanied by countless dust and rust stains. The wind blew so hard that the two could not open their eyes. The first thing they felt was not hot, but hot. It was very, very hot. This was not a temperature that ordinary people could endure. The heat wave was so hot that it could almost ignite the hair on their bodies. If it were not for the water dripping from the ceiling, their clothes would have caught fire immediately. Ding Ming suddenly felt that the ball of fire in his chest was ignited by this shocking heat wave. However, he did not feel uncomfortable this time. Instead, he felt very spirited and had a strong desire to fight. The heat from the door and the fire in his body seemed to fit together perfectly, forming a new kind of energy that flowed through his body. He felt that his strength had recovered a lot in an instant. Even the tingling feeling caused by the poisonous seed in his hand was greatly reduced. What was this place? The two gathered their courage and carefully crept in. Chapter 10. This was a square tunnel. Unlike the cold and damp tunnel outside, it was completely dry and stuffy inside. It was a bit like a sealed jar. Ding Ming used a shovel to swipe at the wall, and the dirt and rust fell off, revealing a bright blue color. This was clearly an alloy steel plate. The two of them could not help but look at each other, and their eyes were filled with shock. One thing was certain now, and that was that this place was definitely not a cave, but a man-made structure. What was hidden inside? The two of them were still fumbling forward when suddenly a loud chi sound filled the entire tunnel. Ding Ming and Little Four were very familiar with this sound. It was the sound of the electricity charging in the exchange center hall. Sure enough, there was a sudden bright light in front of them. All the light sources had been activated, and the entire tunnel was as bright as day. Ding Ming and Little Four were stunned by the scene in front of them. This was clearly a hall similar to the command center of a spaceship. The light sources embedded in the ceiling were emitting a bright blue glow, filling the entire hall with a layer of cool, technological color. The rows of screens on the walls automatically lit up, and the data and images on them began to refresh, but the control panels seemed a little old. In this era of human beings, almost all the work consoles were virtual. However, the consoles in this hall were all made of metal. There were even rotating buttons and square buttons of various sizes. If this was the interior of a building, then this building was too outdated. If this was the place where the secret treasure was hidden, then where was the treasure? Suddenly, a soft, robotic female voice rang out in the hall. This was the voice of the AI system. Gene body detected. Activating experimental system. Experimental SER EEL number ACT 570. System energy insufficient. Requesting backup power. Energy serial number CAP0075. System charging. Progress 5%, 17%, 33%, 58%. Ding Ming and Little Four were completely shocked, speechless. Never in their wildest dreams would they have imagined that such a place would be hidden underground. However, the gentle voice of the system made them feel uneasy. Experimental system serial number ACT5570 has finished charging. Mainframe system is running low on energy. Requesting to enter automatic scanning mode. Automatic scanning mode activated. As soon as the voice fell, many probes drilled out from the ceiling. These probes did not shoot down rays, but densely packed red grain-shaped light shadows. They sprinkled down like a rainstorm, covering the entire hall. In this strange red rain, there was nowhere to hide. Ding Ming and Xiao Si looked like they were drenched in blood. This unimaginable scanning method was really strange and terrifying. Ding Ming soon realized how powerful it was. Every time a red raindrop swept over his left hand, he would feel a piercing pain in his palm. When he looked down, he found that the bean-sized poisonous seed in his palm had completely turned into a poisonous flower. The edges of the flower petals had completely merged with his blood vessels. The poison was spreading up his arm at a speed visible to the naked eye. His entire left arm was completely numb. Oh no! Ding Ming finally felt a great fear descending upon him. However, he reacted quickly. He quickly took out a healing agent from his backpack and poured it into his mouth. As soon as the cold agent entered his stomach, the green liquid on his arm immediately stopped flowing at his elbow joint. Little Four was not lying. The healing agent could only stop the virus from getting worse, but it could not stop the virus from invading his arm. He turned his head and looked to the side. Little Four was already bent over in pain. The green liquid on his back was also spreading to his entire body at a speed visible to the naked eye. Ding Ming did not hesitate. He took out the healing agent and rushed over. The AI system. Warning, warning, the experimental hall will be closed in 5 minutes. The experimental hall will be closed in 5 minutes. All units, please leave immediately. All units, please leave immediately. Let's go. Ding Ming helped Little Four up. This time, he did not dare to be stubborn. The unknown situation had extinguished all his curiosity. At this moment, Ding Ming felt a chill in his face. He quickly raised his head. At some point, a dark shadow had appeared at the entrance of the corridor like a ghost. It was staring at him coldly. Damn it! Ding Ming cursed in his mind. He should not have been so careless. After walking so far into the corridor, he should have noticed that someone was secretly following him. Unfortunately, he had been so distracted by his curiosity that he did not pay attention to what was behind him. Brother Leopard. Ding Ming suddenly calmed down and no longer had the panicked expression from before. He had already smelled a trace of danger from the leopard's body. This trace of danger was even more terrifying than the various changes in the laboratory hall. The AI system was only executing the program. The program was dead, but the human mind was alive. No one could tell what the other party was thinking. Leopard's face was expressionless. I didn't expect you to be able to find this place. Ding Ming was silent. Suddenly, he said, Did Machine Gun Boss send you here? Leopard said calmly, A person down here can only earn 200 points a day at most. This answer was not the question, but Ding Ming finally understood where he had gone wrong. Yes, a laborer would only earn 150 points a day. They would not even have enough nutrient solutions. How could they have enough points to exchange for expensive healing potions? The healing potions cost more than 100 points each. Yet, Ding Ming had casually given them to Machine Gun. It would be strange if Machine Gun did not suspect them. What kind of treasure did you find in PC-35? Sometimes, no matter how astute a person was, he or she would think that his or her plans were flawless, but they would often inadvertently reveal flaws. Ding Ming felt that he had learned a lot this time. As long as he could get through this obstacle, he would have to be more careful in the future. The AI system. Warning, the experimental hall will be closed in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. All units are requested to leave immediately. A thick steel gate appeared at the top of the corridor. It was descending at a very slow speed. Judging from the thickness of the gate, it was impossible to open it with human strength. The system warning sounded more like a notification. Once the hall is closed, no one will be able to leave. Ding Meng could feel that the situation was unusual. He could not act on impulse. He took a deep breath and said, "Brother Leopard, if you need a healing potion, I can give it to you." Leopard's lips curled into a disdainful sneer. "Do you really think I want a healing potion?" Ding Meng's heart sank. He finally understood what the leopard needed. The leopard needed him and little Four to die here. Only with their deaths would the news not be leaked out. Only then would they be able to monopolize this place. Now, no matter who it was, they would be able to think that this place was most likely the way out of the base. Ding Meng slowly let go of Little Four and slowly raised the sharp military shovel. Leopard could not help but sneer again. "Do you think you can escape with that junk in your hand?" Ding Meng did not answer. Any words would be superfluous. The AI system. Warning, the experimental hall will be closed in 4 minutes and 15 seconds. All units are requested to leave immediately. Chapter 11. The scanning in the hall was still ongoing. Ding Meng and Leopard, who were facing off against each other in the blood rain, were dyed with a layer of blurred and strange colors. Leopard was originally somewhat disdainful of Ding Meng's childishness, but gradually he could no longer laugh. Ding Meng was casually standing in front of him, maintaining the same posture without moving an inch. At first glance, there were no gaps in his body, but after a second glance, he realized that Ding Meng did not reveal any flaws at all. Only someone who was well versed in the art of combat could be so calm. This newcomer was not simple. Leopard immediately had a new understanding of Ding Meng. While he was wary of Ding Meng was even more wary of him. Ding Meng knew that Leopard was one of Machine Gun's most capable subordinates. Xiaoxi had told him a long time ago that Leopard had stayed in this dark underground for almost 5 years and had killed at least 200 to 300 people. However, no matter how many people he had killed, a person who had been able to survive for 5 years in this place was not easy to deal with. In Black Gold Base, many battles could not be called battles at all. They were basically life and death battles. The moment they made a move, they had to take the opponent's life. This was because only true experts knew that a battle between experts was the most critical and fatal strike. If the strike missed, there would be endless trouble. It was the same principle as hitting a snake and not killing it. Right now, time was ticking away. The system's voice sounded cold and merciless. At this moment, it was a test of both parties' patience and observation skills. The system's voice said, "Warning, the test hall will be closed in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. All units, please leave immediately." Xiaoxi, who had been enduring great torture on the ground, finally stood up shakily. He could not help but groan because of the pain in his back. This groan caused Ding Meng to habitually glance to the side from the corner of his eyes. In the blink of an eye, Leopard had chosen the most opportune moment to make his move. He was like a real cheetah, pouncing towards Ding Meng at an extremely fast speed. In Ding Meng's vision, the leopard was still 10 meters away, but in the blink of an eye, it had arrived in front of him. Even though Ding Meng was mentally prepared, he was still slightly surprised. The leopard's speed was completely out of his expectations, but he did not hesitate at all. The soldier's shovel cut across the leopard's neck like lightning. All of this was equally shocking. Even the blood rain in the air seemed to have been cut off in an instant. Unfortunately, it still couldn't cut through Ding Meng's neck. Leopard's fist arrived first. His right fist hit Ding Meng's wrist with a bang, and the shovel immediately slipped out of his hand. Then, his left hand quickly hit Ding Meng's chest with an uppercut. Ding Meng flew back 4 or 5 meters and fell to the ground. The moment he fell to the ground, Ding Meng clearly felt that 2 of his ribs had been broken. The sharp pain did not make him go limp. Instead, it ignited his fighting spirit. When a person was in a life-and-death situation, Not only did they become more clear-headed, they would also stimulate a beast-like potential. When Leopard's boot kicked toward his head, Ding Meng's body suddenly shrank back. Taking advantage of the momentum, he kicked off the control panel behind him. His whole body leaped out of the water like a fish, and he jumped into the air. His right palm turned into a knife hand shape and slashed at Leopard's temple with lightning speed. Compared to Leopard's earlier attack, Ding Meng's counterattack was much fiercer and sharper. There was another muffled bang. Leopard raised his fist to protect the right side of his head in time, and the knife hand cut the back of his hand. Leopard also clearly felt the force of Ding Meng's attack on the back of his hand, and the bones in his palm seemed to be slightly broken. However, before he could feel the pain on the back of his hand, an even more intense pain suddenly spread from his left shoulder to his whole body. He also fell to the ground. It turned out that although he had blocked Ding Meng's knife hand, Ding Meng quickly withdrew his hand and used the momentum of his fall to turn his knife hand into an elbow to counterattack. In an instant, Leopard was sent flying. Not only was this movement flawless, but it was also incredibly skillful. At this moment, both of them fell to the ground. Ding Meng propped himself up with one hand and stared at Ding Meng like a hungry wolf. Leopard was lying on the ground on his side and also staring at Ding Meng fiercely. The system's voice said, "Warning, the test hall will be closed in 2 minutes and 50 seconds. All units, please leave immediately." Leopard suddenly said sternly, "You're definitely not a laborer. Who the hell are you?" Ding Meng was not moved at all. He knew that Leopard was also seriously injured. At this moment, even if he could buy a few more seconds, he would still be able to catch his breath. After all, he was not in good condition either. Not only was his chest in extreme pain, but his blood was also rushing up. If he could not catch his breath, he would fall, and if he fell, he would be at the mercy of his opponent. But more than that, he had activated his observation mode again. However, he was not very lucky this time. Now, his dual-color vision was almost completely filled with black, and the image was quite blurry. It was very likely caused by his low stamina and lack of energy. Ding Meng took a deep breath and suddenly said, "Do you think the commander doesn't know what you're planning?" He was taking a gamble because he had heard from Little For that the mercenary group originally had absolute control over the main mining area. However, in recent years, the influence of the machine guns had been increasing. Moreover, the underground mine was getting fewer and fewer, and there were more and more disputes. The mercenaries were too proud to come down here, so the commander had made some concessions and allowed the machine guns to control part of the area to maintain order. Until today, when this place was discovered, he was betting that the machine guns and the others had their own selfish motives. He was also betting that this was the place the commander was looking for. His goal was to provoke the other party into making the first move. With his injuries, he could not perform any more difficult movements. Even the slightest movement of his body would cause unbearable pain in his chest. Sure enough, Leopard's pupils shrank. "Kid, you were actually sent by them." As soon as he finished speaking, Leopard got up and charged at him again. This time, he did not look like a leopard, but more like a tiger. The ground seemed to tremble with every step he took. He was obviously really angry. He could not let someone like Ding Meng return to the surface alive. Ding Meng completely ignored the other party's tiger-like aura. He also got up and charged at Leopard. He was going to fight him head-on. When Leopard saw that Ding Meng actually dared to charge at him like this, he was secretly delighted. "You're too naive. You dare not dodge my attack. Then go to hell." But in the next moment, something completely unexpected happened. Ding Meng's body suddenly leaned forward and pressed his hands against the ground. Not only did he avoid the fatal punch, but he also slammed his head into Leopard's ribs. Leopard's chest cracked. His ribs were probably broken. This posture made him look like a human stick. It was indeed a little ugly, but it was definitely practical and effective. But Leopard was also a tough nut to crack. As he was sent flying, he raised his hand, and a slender and sharp military knife turned into a sharp white light in the rain of blood. With a splurt, the cold light sank into Ding Meng's shoulder. More than half of the knife had pierced into Ding Meng's shoulder. Only then did Ding Meng fall heavily to the ground and stop moving. The system's voice said, "Warning, the test hall will be closed in 1 minute and 30 seconds. All units, please leave immediately." Chapter 12. Brother Ding. Little Four, who was at the door, suddenly shouted in grief and indignation. He, who had always been timid and weak, suddenly had a burst of courage. He raised a shovel and rushed over without a care for anything else. The leopard was badly injured by Ding Meng's attack. He lay on the ground and could not get up for a while. However, Ding Meng's combat ability was not enough to pose a threat to him. When the shovel came down, the leopard's right foot suddenly kicked backwards and the shovel was sent flying. Following that, the leopard's left foot kicked backwards, and Little Four was kicked back to his original position. He was lying on the ground, unable to get up. The system's voice said, "Warning, the experiment hall will be closed in 59 seconds, 58 seconds, 57 seconds." The leopard staggered forward. He looked at the corpse on the ground and gasped for air. Ding Meng had seriously injured him. His shoulder blade was shattered, and a few of his ribs were broken. He did not expect this young man to have such good skills. Even among the mercenaries above, he would be considered an expert. "So what? You're lucky to die under my light shadow," the leopard muttered. He reached out to pull out the stiletto on the corpse's shoulder. He did have a right to be arrogant. This glowing shadow stiletto was a rare weapon. Even the mercenaries above might not have such a good stiletto. Glowing shadow stiletto had helped him hurt countless strong enemies in the mining area and helped him escape from desperate situations countless times. Ding Meng's death under the stiletto was not unjust at all. However, the moment he bent down to pull out the stiletto, the corpse suddenly raised his right hand and swept toward his armpit in a strange arc essence. A deadly killer, a real betrayal. A dark golden light rose in the leopard's eyes. The leopard's facial muscles suddenly twisted. This was the expression of a human being who was in extreme pain. A dark golden blade drilled into his armpit. The blade started from his armpit, followed his arm through his triceps, elbow tendons, forearm tendons, and finally stopped at the ulnar artery in his wrist. This arc was as precise as a scalpel. Not only did it cut open his artery, it also cut the tendons in his hand. Whoosh! Blood sprayed out like a fountain. Under the blood rain, it looked like a red demonic fog. The leopard could no longer feel pain. Half of its body was completely numb. Then, the corpse on the ground came back to life. Ding Meng turned over, staggered, and half knelt. He turned his back to the leopard and slashed again without even turning his head. The dark golden light drilled into his chest. This was the gap between the third and fourth ribs, which was also the vital part of the heart. This time, he finally saw clearly what the dark golden light was. It was a sharp, curved, crescent-shaped knife. Its entire body had a strange curve, and it looked like the sharp teeth of a monster. It was a pity that the knife used to kill was never for people to see. When you saw it clearly, it would take your life. The leopard lowered his head and looked at his chest. He still could not believe that this was real. Then, he looked up at Ding Meng. At this moment, the young laborer in his eyes was gone. What he saw was the image of a ruthless, cold-blooded killer. Although he had seen people killed before, and he had killed many people himself, he had never seen such a precise and ruthless way of killing. An indescribable sense of fear suddenly surged in his heart. "What are you?" His voice was suddenly cut off because Ding Meng did not give him a chance to speak. He raised his hand and pulled out the claw knife. As the blood mist sprayed out, the leopard's corpse fell to the ground with a thud. Ding Meng sat down and leaned against the control panel, gasping for air. The last attack had exhausted all of his energy. After the bayonet pierced his shoulder, he almost fainted. He held back his last breath and waited for the leopard to come over. He was still betting. He was betting that the leopard would not give up easily with a light shadow bayonet. Just like his T-shaped claw knife, he loved it as if it was his own life. Instead of saying that he liked to gamble, it was better to say that his life was mostly given by this knife. In the center of the shiny, sharp blade, there was an exquisite T-shaped character engraved. Unfortunately, the claw knife was thrown to the side, and he had no strength to pick it up. The system's voice said, "Warning, Warning, the experiment hall is closed. Final countdown, 30 seconds, 29 seconds, 28 seconds. Brother Ding. Xiaoxi crawled over from the passage with difficulty. Ding Ming pointed to the ground weakly. He was pointing at the bag on the leopard's waist. Xiaoxi did not understand what he meant. Ding Ming panted and said, "He should have a lot of good stuff. Let's take it back." Xiaoxi reached out to help him up, but Ding Ming waved his hand and said, "If you run into machine gun on the way and he asks you, just say that you didn't see the leopard and that I'm still inside. Go find Vader and let him treat you in the med bay. Maybe we'll still have hope that way." His words were somewhat vague, but this time, Xiaoxi finally understood what he meant. He could still walk, but Ding Ming was too badly injured to move. If he could successfully find Vader with this bag, the wound on his back would be healed. When he recovered, he could come down to save Ding Ming. Looking at Ding Ming's weak face, Xiaoxi's eyes suddenly reddened. He understood that Ding Ming had made this choice because he did not want to implicate him. So what if Ding Ming was not injured? So what if they could escape together? The leopard had already died at the hands of Ding Ming. Would Machine Gun let go of Ding Ming? That was simply impossible. So, in the end, he would still die. If the words of a dying man could be said to be kind, then Ding Ming, letting him go alone, was undoubtedly a kind gesture. Kindness was such a laughable thing in this place, but it was also so precious because it was not something that could be exchanged for with crystalline diamonds. The system's voice said, "Warning, warning. The experiment hall will be closed in 14 seconds, 13 seconds, 12 seconds, 11 seconds. Xiaoxi clenched his teeth and said word by word, "Brother Ding, hang in there. I will definitely come back. Please believe in me." After saying that, he picked up the leopard's bag and turned to leave. Looking at Xiaoxi's limping figure disappear at the entrance of the passage, Ding Ming's face revealed a gratified smile. This was the 45th day since he had arrived at Black Gold Base. This was the first time he smiled in this place, and it was very likely to be the last time. The system's voice said, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The steel gate at the entrance of the passage had been completely lowered. With a click, it closed with the walls, and the experiment hall was finally closed. Chapter 13. As the experiment room closed, the female voice of the AI system rang out again. Automatic scanning complete. Energy source code CAP0075 has been activated. Gene preparation complete. Experimental system code ACT5570 is being generated. All authorizations complete. The experiment program has officially begun. Ding Ming could no longer hear the series of mechanical voices. He gritted his teeth and pulled out the glowing blade. He swallowed a nutrient solution and a healing agent, but the wound was still bleeding profusely. Leopard's punch had not only broken his ribs, it had also damaged his internal organs. However, the blade had pierced through his lungs and liver. Ding Ming felt that the wound was like a hole. All of his life force was leaking out of the hole like a flood. Death was only a matter of time. It was not that he had not struggled on the brink of death before, but this time he felt it more clearly and deeply. In the past, no matter how dangerous or difficult the situation was, he would always struggle desperately to escape because he still had a breath of air in his heart. He would not give up. He would not back down. He would rather die than bow his head. But this time, he truly felt despair. Not only was his life force draining away, his breath seemed to be draining away as well. It was like a blooming flower that would inevitably wither gradually until it turned into dust. This was a law that no one could change. Ding Ming felt his eyelids getting heavier and heavier. He was getting more and more sleepy. Before he closed his eyes, the last thing he felt was not cold and merciless despair, nor was it the fear of death. Instead, it was a kind of helplessness that came after exhaustion. He had tried so hard to live on, but in the end, he could not escape the arrangement of fate. Perhaps death was the best ending for him. At this moment, the experiment hall had stopped firing grain-shaped rays. Instead, countless probes were shooting out large clouds of milky white gas. The hall was soon shrouded in a thick fog. The AI system said, executing release program number 12. The probe immediately stopped ejecting gas and began to emit rays again. This time, the rays were very strange. Rather than calling them rays, they were more like halos that spread out. These halos seemed to be some kind of energy. When they spread out, they turned into huge light waves. The light waves changed colors at an astonishing frequency, just like a rainbow that fell from the sky. The rainbow scattered on the surrounding walls and quickly rebounded. After colliding, it immediately fused with the gas, forming a strange mass of chaos. If Ding Meng could open his eyes and see the scene in front of him, he might be able to figure out many key clues. The leopard's corpse that was wrapped in the chaos suddenly underwent a terrifying change. As soon as the corpse came in contact with the gas, its skin immediately turned green. It was the same color as the monster's venom in the pool. The venom instantly spread throughout its body, and the corpse actually stood up again. It let out a strange howl, and then its fingers grew at a speed visible to the naked eye, becoming sharp and sharp before this terrifying change could fully take place. The cold voice of the AI system rang out again. Detected a change in the gene body. No compatibility. The elimination program has been initiated. 3 thick red rays immediately descended from the sky and hit the head of the mutating corpse. With a bang, the corpse exploded into a cloud of green mist. In the blink of an eye, the green mist turned into fine powder and was sucked into the chaos. The leopard no longer existed in this world. The same thing happened to Ding Meng soon. The green poison first entered Ding Meng's body from the top of his head, then slowly spread to his chest, abdomen, legs, toes. However, when the green mist moved to his left elbow, it seemed to hit an invisible wall. No matter how hard it tried, it could not move any further. The AI system said, detected that the gene body has been infected. Compatibility 10%. Ding Meng's left arm had been poisoned before. The green poison was now changing color slightly, as if it was resisting the invasion of the laboratory's poison. The color changed from pale green to emerald green, from emerald green to dark blue, from dark blue to pale yellow, and from pale yellow to fiery red. The AI system suddenly spoke faster. Detected that the gene body has been infected. Compatibility 20%. Detected that the gene body has been infected. Compatibility 30%. Detected that the gene body has been infected. Compatibility 40%. Detected that the gene body has been infected. Compatibility 50%. When the compatibility rate reached 80%, the cold voice of the AI system actually carried a hint of excitement and exhilaration. Yes, detected that the gene body has been eradicated. Compatibility 90%. This place had been tested thousands of times, but no gene body with such high compatibility had ever appeared. Now, a miracle was happening. Compatibility 94%. Compatibility 95%. Compatibility 96%. Compatibility 97%. When the compatibility reached 100%, Ding Meng's body could no longer be seen. It was colorless. It was just a human body lying on the ground. The dazzling light plated the entire hall with a layer of white luster. It was so white that it was not normal. The AI system immediately gave an order. Execute main program command number 1. Countless fine and bright white rays shot down from the probes on the ceiling at the same time. All the rays melted into the human-shaped pupil of light. The sizzling noise sounded like they were burning, as if they were trying to transform the pupil of light into something else. At the same time, the giant screen in the middle of the console finally lit up. A simple progress bar appeared on it, and a deep robotic male voice sounded from the console. It was obviously another AI system. Main program command number 1 is in progress. Current progress is 8,913%. Main program command number 1 is in progress. Current progress is 5,467%. Main program command number 1 is in progress. Current progress is 5,899%. Main program command number 1 is in progress. Current progress is 1,418%. Main program command number 1 is in progress. Current progress is 8,964%. Suddenly, the AI system's voice changed. Serial number CAP0075 has insufficient backup energy. Unable to continue with main program command number 1. The female voice from the central system did not respond this time. It seemed to be silent, but it also seemed to be hesitating. However, after a while, the central system's answer was extremely firm. Continue with main program command number 1. Final authorization. Authorization complete. At this time, the rays that hit the human body were obviously dimming in brightness and color. It seemed like the two systems were forcibly using backup energy. Gradually, the intensity of the rays weakened. Gradually, many screens automatically turned off. Gradually, even the light sources in various places were slowly extinguished. In the end, when the progress bar showed that the progress was 8,208%, the rays finally disappeared. With a click, all the facilities automatically shut down. The whole world fell into the suffocating darkness again. Everything returned to normal. However, the abnormal thing was that the human body on the ground had turned back into Ding Meng's image. Coincidentally, the 8,208% completion rate was Ding Meng's serial number in the black gold base. Fate did not joke with him. Fate would not joke with anyone, because your choice was your fate. Chapter 14. It was evening again, but the central square of the black gold base was still filled with people. The laborers who had returned with the harvest had all returned, and everyone was looking forward to their turn. Little Four, who was in the queue, hugged his bag tightly and looked around vigilantly. He was afraid of seeing Machine Gun's accomplices. On his way back from the lab, he was lucky not to have met Machine Gun, but he felt even more uneasy. It wasn't because he was weak, but because of his instincts. Sooner or later, people would find out about Leopard, and sooner or later, they would come looking for him. Everything around him seemed normal, but in fact, there was a hidden danger. Little Four didn't want to think too much about it. There was only one thing he wanted to do now, and that was to heal himself as soon as possible and then return underground to save Ding Meng. In Leopard's bag, there were quite a few good things: 8 nutrient solutions for healing agents, 1 blood-generating agent, and a few scattered diamonds. Surprisingly, there was a red and blue diamond that was about the size of a pinky finger. Other than that, there was also a gas-explosive pistol in the bag. Little Four didn't dare to take the gun, because the base absolutely prohibited laborers from carrying weapons. If he was found out, he would be cruelly punished by the mercenaries. However, things happened faster than he imagined. As soon as he walked through the iron gate of the exchange center, the scanning beam from above turned from green to purplish-red in an instant. Then, the iron gate glowed red, and the alarm was immediately triggered. Warning, warning, target number 2187, A-class danger level. Rank A was considered a very dangerous level in the base. Usually, they were the ferocious labor leaders who had killed too many people and were specially taken care of by the base. Such a person was like a bomb that could explode at any time. At that moment, the crowd didn't have time to disperse. Sadler's whip flew down from the stairs and tightly wrapped around Little Four's neck. Little Four felt as if a pair of iron hands were strangling his throat, and he almost stopped breathing. Then, 2 mercenaries flew down and knocked him to the ground with a few punches and kicks. Little Four didn't resist and just hugged his head tightly. He didn't have the ability to resist, and he knew that resistance was useless. Besides, he was used to it. If you didn't get beaten up in the base, you couldn't be considered a qualified laborer. It wasn't until the mercenaries tossed him into the lobby of the exchange center that he saw clearly that the person sitting on the sofa this time wasn't Vader, but Machine Gun. What made him most uneasy was that Machine Gun's attitude seemed very gentle, completely unlike his usual ferocious and ruthless appearance. Machine Gun walked over and helped him up. "You're badly hurt." Instead of asking about the whereabouts of a leopard, he was concerned about his injuries. Little Fur didn't know how to answer. As soon as he opened his mouth, he was interrupted by Machine Gun. This healing agent of yours can't deal with it at all. Fortunately, Commander Vader took care of us and allowed us to use the medical bay under special circumstances. As soon as he finished speaking, the alloy door on the eastern wall opened automatically, revealing a spotlessly white private lounge. Vader was standing beside the medical bay, smiling. He seemed to have been waiting there for a long time. Little Four was no fool. From Machine Gun and Vader's seemingly gentle smile, he could already smell the danger. However, the medical bay was right in front of him. How could he resist something that even Ding Ming couldn't refuse? The protective cover slowly closed and rotated slowly. Dense white light spots sprinkled down from the medical bay, and Little Four entered a state of deep sleep. Vader turned on his wristwatch, and a virtual screen began to display the treatment information. Target condition: weakened 59% target symptoms. Unidentifiable. Infection level: 41% remarks. 116 cases of the same disease. Exclusive range: black gold base. Cases: number 93, number 116, number 788, number 811, number 821, number 923, number 948, number 1077, number 1114. A series of overwhelming numbers refreshed on the screen. Machine Gun couldn't help but ask, "Is it that mysterious infection?" Vader nodded. "You did well this time." This confirmed that the unidentifiable, unknown infection in Little Four's body was the mysterious poison that all of the medical facilities in the base were helpless against. Machine Gun said, "If I remember correctly, he went to area PC-35 with that newcomer, number 8028. I think his name is Ding Ming." Ding Ming? Vader was a little surprised. He hadn't expected Ding Ming to be involved. "Sir, do you know this person?" Machine Gun regretted his words as soon as they left his mouth. How could the high-ranking leader of a mercenary group know these lowly laborers? Vader, on the other hand, appeared very calm. "I have some impression of number 8028. I've also heard him mention number 2187. Their recent harvest has been pretty good." Machine Gun's eyes finally lit up. He looked at Little Four, who was still sleeping in the medical bay. "Looks like he knows the exact location." Vader said, "Then we'll have to see if number 2187 is willing to tell us." Machine Gun sneered. "I have 10,000 ways to make him tell the truth." Vader immediately glanced at him. "You seem to have forgotten the rules here." Machine Gun immediately lowered his head. "I'm sorry, sir. Don't worry, I've always followed the rules. It's good that you understand." Vader also turned his head to look at the medical bay. His eyes were shining. "How long will it take for your men to find the exact coordinates?" Machine Gun looked troubled. "Sir, area PC-35 is a newly developed area. Many areas are densely mined. At the same time, the terrain is rather complicated. Also, the people who went there..." Vader's expression immediately turned cold. "I want the exact time, not your explanation." Machine Gun pondered for a moment. 3 days. We'll definitely find it in 3 days." Vader coldly said, "That's too long. I'll give you a deadline. You must find it within 24 hours. Machine Gun didn't say anything. If he wanted to find the exact location in area PC-35, which was comparable to the capillaries of a human body, within a day, he would have to increase the mercenary group's manpower by 3 times. However, this was almost impossible. Vader didn't have the authority to mobilize, and Machine Gun also didn't have the ability to summon people. Vader seemed to know what he was thinking. He suddenly said, "I have to remind you, since this number 2187 knows the exact coordinates, then that Ding Ming might have already arrived there." Machine Gun suddenly came to his senses. "Sir, you mean?" Vader nodded slowly. "That's right. We can make an exception and reward those who have made significant contributions to the base. In the mercenary group's contract, the entrusting party clearly stipulated this point. We have the authority to do so. Furthermore, I can also convey this point on behalf of the Supreme Commander. No matter who it is, As long as they find the source of the virus and let us research a cure, we will give them freedom and let them leave this place. He patted Machine Gun's shoulder. You've been in the base for almost 6 years. There are some things that I think you can see more clearly and understand better than anyone else. Machine Gun nodded slowly. Gritting his teeth, he said, I understand, sir. I guarantee that you will know the exact coordinates within 24 hours. As he said this, he turned his head to look at Little Four in the medical bay. His malicious gaze revealed traces of undetectable viciousness. Chapter 15. It was still dark, the kind of boundless, eternal darkness. Suddenly, a voice rang out in the darkness. It was definitely not the mechanical and slightly trembling system voice, but a friendly, and slightly playful female voice like the laughter of the girl next door. Ding Ming, wake up. Ding Ming, you should get up. Lying down is very comfortable, right? Who's calling my name? Ding Ming's brain finally had a weak reaction from the little bit of consciousness he had left. Ding Ming, you lazy guy, get up. This voice is so familiar. Is it my family? Are they calling me? Ding Ming's weak consciousness was quickly awakened by this thought. Ding Ming suddenly opened his eyes. Unfortunately, he could not see anything because the world was still dark. Ha ha! Ding Ming, you're finally awake. The girl's laughter was as pleasant as a silver bell. No, his instincts were instantly awakened. There had never been a woman in the Black Gold base. Could it be that he had fallen into some kind of trap? Is the leopard's partner here? Ding Ming's entire body quivered as she sat up with a swish sound. Huh? What's going on? He finally found out what was really wrong. His body was very light, and his movements were abnormally vigorous. His whole body was filled with an unprecedented amount of energy. He subconsciously touched his left shoulder, and the wound was gone. He then touched his chest, and his ribs were as good as new. His body's current state was even stronger than it had ever been in the past. Didn't I get hit by the leopard's iron fist and military knife? Wasn't I already dead? Is this the world of spirits? The girl's voice rang out again. Ding Ming, congratulations, you've completed the fusion. Who's there? Ding Ming jumped up and looked around vigilantly. Although it was still dark, Ding Ming focused and quickly opened his observation vision. Then he was completely stunned. Unlike the previous times, the observation vision had undergone a qualitative change this time. With him as the center, a circle of spherical light spread out in all directions with a buzzing sound. It was like a painting that was slowly unfolding. The full view of the laboratory hall was immediately presented in front of him. It was not only clear, but it was also not black and white. Yes, it was not monotonous black and white anymore. It was colorful, and the most authentic colors in the world. The alloy steel plate with a blue luster, the control panel that shone with pure silver light, and the big and small gold, red, green, white knobs and buttons on the control panel. Everything was presented in real life. This, Ding Ming could not explain the reason. Fortunately, the girl's voice explained for him. Ding Ming, this is because your psychokinesis has improved. Mind power? Ding Ming was confused. The girl said, all life forms in the universe can produce bioelectricity and release electric pulses. The human brain is even more amazing. It can also release brain waves. People with strong abilities can upgrade it to mind power, which has the function of detection and guidance. Your mind power has reached this level now. So that's how it is. Ding Ming understood a little, but he quickly regained his vigilance. Who are you? Me? The girl suddenly laughed. Hee, Ding Ming. I'm your partner and also your assistant. Let me think. This description is not right. In your human language, I should be your friend. Friend? Ding Ming sneered. In the Black Gold base, the word friend was a joke. Who are you? The girl laughed. Yo, you idiot. If I'm not your friend, then what am I? Look, I'm talking to you, aren't I? Ding Ming did not know whether to laugh or cry. If someone who could talk to him was his friend, then he had friends everywhere in the base, and all of them wanted to kill him at any time. The girl's logic was really unique. He was helpless. Fine, even if you're my friend, why can't I see you? Where are you hiding? He used his mind power to scan the room again. Other than him, there was no one else in the hall. The girl laughed again. Ding Meng, you idiot. I'm inside your body. Huh? Ding Meng was shocked. What? What are you? The girl said, fine, I'm actually a super AI program. In the experiment just now, I've been successfully implanted into your body and perfectly integrated with you. Ding Meng knew about this. Aren't programs stored in memory? Yes, I'm a memory, the girl replied. But I'm a cutting-edge memory. I've been modified into a smart chip and installed in your body. This. Ding Meng was stunned again. He lowered his head and scanned his body. He did not want to be like those second and third generations of reconstructed warriors, with metal plates all over his body. He did not look like a human, a ghost, or even a machine. Stop looking. You can't see me, the girl said casually. A smart chip is a cutting-edge biochip. Once it's installed, it will become one with you. Even if you die, it won't be separated. Ding Meng was speechless. He did not expect something like this to happen to him. He did not know whether it was a blessing or a curse. The girl seemed to know what he was thinking and said, Ding Meng, it's easy for you to see me. Focus your mind on your eyes. Following her instructions, Ding Meng finally saw it. The white core positioning point in the center of his telekinetic vision appeared again. It was jumping around happily, as if it was trying to express its goodwill to him. Ding Meng asked curiously, You're this white? The girl said, I'm not. This white dot belongs to you. It's your unique point of convergence. You were only able to successfully fuse with it during the experiment. Now, I can only rely on it to communicate with you. Ding Meng was confused by the girl's words again. My knowledge is still too shallow. The girl laughed. Ding Meng, don't belittle yourself. I'm just like you. I need to constantly learn and absorb knowledge. I'm a growth-type, smart program. Ding Meng was curious again. Growth type? The girl replied, Yes, to put it simply, I'm an encyclopedic memory that depends on you. As long as you continue to grow stronger, I'll be able to continuously obtain greater authority and use more functions to help you grow. This is the ultimate command set by main program number 1. Poor Ding Meng was confused again. I don't really understand what you're talking about. How about this? How should I address you? The girl laughed happily. Aha! Ding Meng, you're finally willing to ask for my name. It seems like our fusion and communication was very successful. The core system chose you because the compatibility of the smart program can still be screened. Ding Meng felt a headache coming on when he heard these professional terms. He quickly interrupted her. What's your name? The girl laughed. My name is Little Rascal. You could just call me Little Rascal. You don't have to talk to me directly. You can communicate with me through your mind. Ding Meng could not help but laugh. It was hard for him not to laugh at this name. Did you come up with this name yourself? Little Rascal laughed. Of course not. When the core system created me, it named me based on number 386. Its programming principle is through. Okay. I got it. Ding Meng quickly interrupted her. Little Rascal, is it? Tell me, what do you mean by experimental fusion just now? Chapter 16. Little Rascal finally stopped laughing and said in a serious tone, The full name of this experiment is the King Gene Synthesis Experiment, or TK experiment for short. The King? Ding Meng thought for a moment and said, Doesn't that mean king? Yes, in Chinese language, it is the King experiment, Little Rascal explained. Little Rascal explained, The purpose of the experiment is to create a new greatest king. Ding Meng smiled. In this boundless world, among all the living beings who dared to call themselves the strongest king, this TK experiment was quite boastful. Little Rascal continued. Before the experiment, your left palm was infected with the K virus. Ding Meng finally stopped laughing. K virus? What kind of virus is that? Little Rascal explained, This is an advanced virus that modifies genes. It can change many of the human body's functions, shorten the steps of evolution, and maximize the human's abilities. However, the virus you were infected with was a mutated K virus, not a pure original. Ding Meng nodded. He finally understood the whole story. Little Rascal said, the core system injected you with a pure original first-generation K virus. But during the experiment, the mutated version was able to resist the original's invasion. What does that mean? Ding Meng didn't understand. It means that your genetic compatibility is very high. After testing, your compatibility has reached 100%. You can perfectly fuse with the virus. Little Rascal continued. The K virus is a very unstable virus. Organisms that can't fuse with it will undergo all kinds of strange changes, resulting in strong side effects. Only a very small number of organisms with special genes and physiques can perfectly fuse with it and use it to its best effect. Ding Meng thought for a moment. So, I seem to be the lucky one? Little Rascal said, in theory, yes. No organism has ever been able to achieve 100% compatibility. The results of the experiment tell me that since the birth of the K virus, you are the only organism that can perfectly fuse with it. The only one? Ding Meng didn't believe it. Little Rascal said, yes, you are the only one. The previous experiments all failed, and you're the only one who is still alive. Why is your compatibility so high? Why can genes coexist with viruses? Then you have to ask yourself, where are you from? What have you been through before? What is your past? What kind of creature are you? Perhaps these are the reasons. Ding Meng's expression was somewhat absent-minded. His gaze fell into the depths of the darkness, but it was more like he was gazing into a distant place, as if he was reminiscing about the past. This place is an experimental hall. How many times has this place been tested? He suddenly changed the topic. Little Rascal said, I'm sorry, I don't have enough authority to access more detailed information. All right. Ding Meng felt a little helpless. But how do you know that I've completely fused with the virus? What if I'm a failed experiment? It's just that the side effects haven't taken effect yet. His worries were not unfounded. If the previous symptoms of stinging eyes, chest burning, and dizziness appeared again, it might become a side effect of the virus. Little Rascal said, if you were a failed experiment, then you would have been eliminated during the experiment. Eliminated? Ding Meng did not understand. What do you mean? Little Rascal said, it means that there's nothing left. The core system will turn useless trash into air to purify the environment. She seemed to think that this explanation was too abstract, so she changed her words. Didn't a human come in before? Didn't he die? He was also a test subject, but he didn't have compatibility, so the system eliminated him. Ding Meng felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying that a dead person is also a test subject? No. Little Rascal corrected him. It's that every gene-body organism that enters the laboratory is a test subject. Ding Meng hesitated and said, what about the leopard? No, what about the corpse? Little Rascal's voice was emotionless. It has been eliminated. Ding Meng was speechless again. Fortunately, he had not seen the chaotic scene before. He could not imagine it at all. He suddenly felt that it was difficult to communicate with Little Rascal. There were many things that he did not understand and could not understand. So he changed his words and said, okay, so in the end, I accidentally came here and became a test subject? Little Rascal said, correct. Ding Meng said, and then I got infected by the virus? Little Rascal said, correct. Ding Meng said, the virus didn't kill me. Instead, it allowed me to live? Little Rascal said, correct. Ding Meng said, according to what you said, I've successfully fused with the virus, so I should be able to use my talents? Little Rascal said, correct. Ding Meng said, then what talent can I use? Little Rascal's tone was cheerful again. Congratulations, Ding Meng. You're now an origin ability user. What? This time, Ding Meng was truly shocked. He actually knew about origin ability users. He had heard too many stories about origin ability users. He was so envious that he had become numb. Origin energy was actually the origin of the universe. The Big Bang had occurred tens of billions of years ago and was still ongoing. The energy produced by the Big Bang was the source of all the movements in the universe. The so-called white dwarfs, supernovas, quasars, dark matter, nebulae, black holes, meteorites, microwaves, and other phenomena in the universe were all caused by the movement of this energy. In a vast and boundless universe, the human world was not even a drop in the ocean. However, humans were a race that excelled at learning. After hundreds of centuries of research, humans finally discovered that this energy was practically omnipresent in the universe. Moreover, as the human race developed, a few humans could sense the existence of origin energy. They could even absorb it and store it in their bodies, stimulating their own potential and unleashing their extraordinary abilities. Origin ability users were precisely those extraordinary humans. The outstanding ones among them not only changed the history of the human race, but also wrote countless beautiful, elegant, passionate chapters. Ding Meng was still in shock. Little Rascal immediately woke him up. Ding Meng, look at your dazed expression. Could it be that you still don't believe it? Ding Meng came back to his senses, and a bitter smile appeared on his face. He really didn't believe it. To him, origin ability users were just too distant a concept. Take Black Gold Base, for example. This damn place definitely didn't have a single origin ability user, not even the mercenaries. The composition of the laborers here was roughly like this. People who were judged to be inferior the moment they were born. Interstellar vagabonds who cheated and fooled around. Criminals who broke the law and didn't have any skills, so they were exiled. Imbeciles who came from the slums and were born with birth defects. Alien refugees who didn't belong to any country. In short, these people all had one thing in common. To put it bluntly, they were all useless people. They didn't contribute anything to the human race, and instead occupied precious social resources. In the Empire, these kinds of people would be directly destroyed by humanitarianism. However, the Federation emphasized humanitarianism. Since they couldn't casually destroy lives, they might as well send these people to some remote places to work as laborers. If you worked hard, you would at least contribute something. What did you contribute? Naturally, it was to contribute your youth, your labor, your flesh, and even your life. You could exchange it for wealth. Exchange it for those luxurious jewelry, stained with blood and tears from the aristocrats in these so-called high-end places, becoming a symbol of their status and glory. The mercenaries who managed this place were mostly ordinary people who couldn't sense origin energy. They had no hope of becoming origin ability users in this lifetime, so they might as well take up guns and squeeze these laborers dry. After all, one of the things that humans were best at was bullying their own kind. If an origin ability user appeared in this barren place, Ding Meng would definitely think that person was a mentally retarded child with a level 10 mental illness. However, Little Rascal was an AI program. Logically speaking, its judgment shouldn't be wrong. However, when it judged that Ding Meng was an origin ability user, other than Ding Meng bitterly smiling, there was nothing else he could do. Little Rascal was somewhat dissatisfied. Ding Meng, do as I say. Withdraw your telekinesis and control it to a range of 15 meters. Try it and see what happens. Chapter 17. The laboratory hall covered an area of about 1,000 square meters. His telekinetic vision could cover the entire area. If he could control it to a range of 15 meters, it would basically reduce his perception range by half. Ding Meng gave it some thought and decided to follow Little Rascal's instructions. He focused his mind and focused his mind. The sphere of light slowly shrank. Just like how it had been shot out before, the scroll was slowly closing up. Every time it shrank a certain distance, his vision became clearer and he could see more things. When the sphere of light stopped at a range of 15 meters, Ding Meng felt like his eyes had become magnifying glasses. Not only could he see everything clearly, he could also see things that he normally could not see. The smooth surface of the alloy steel plates actually had deep veins. Some parts had already rusted, and the rusty particles seemed to be evaporating. Many of the buttons and keyboards on the control panel had aged. Many of the buttons were covered in tiny cracks. Now, he could clearly count how many cracks there were. The screen that had long been extinguished was actually covered in dust. The thickness of the dust was also visible. The dust on the upper left corner of the central screen seemed to be especially thick. This, Ding Meng was shocked. He did not expect telekinetic vision to be so amazing. Little Rascal said, "Now, control it to a range of 10 meters." The sphere of light continued to shrink. At this moment, his vision could no longer be described as clear. Everything within 10 meters was reflected in his mind. Countless tiny particles that could not be seen with the naked eye floated in the air. The floor that was originally as smooth as a mirror was actually covered in a thin layer of dust. The claw blade lay not far away. Even the T in the center of the blade was embedded with a lot of grease. Damn, this is even better than X-ray vision. Ding Meng was shocked. Continue to shrink it. Control it to a range of 5 meters, Little Rascal urged. When it came to a stop at a position of 5 meters, the light waves completely formed a light shield that enveloped Ding Meng within it. At this moment, what Ding Meng could see was no longer just the microscopic world. Countless drifting air currents and surging cyclones interweaved together as if there was an invisible energy. Not only did it distort space-time, but it also emitted waves. If this sort of fluctuation could be described, it was like a heavy hammer striking the surface of a drum, and the strength, sound waves, and tremors that bounced back all palpitated one's soul. One would feel as if one was receiving divine irrigation and baptism in the center of a vast and boundless ocean, causing one to feel ashamed of one's inferiority and reverence. Ding Meng suddenly calmed down. "This is origin energy?" Little Rascal finally smiled. What do you think? Do you believe me now? Are you surprised? Are you surprised? It would be a lie to say that he was not surprised, but Ding Meng, who had lived on the edge of life and death for a long time, was calm at this moment. He knew that if a person could accept a new power, it was best to stay calm. This was not a profound philosophy, but his instinct and habit. However, Ding Meng, don't thank me so quickly. Now, sit down and relax your body. Focus your mind and reduce the range of your control to 3 meters. Then, use your heart to feel them. Ding Meng did not hesitate. He immediately sat down cross-legged and focused his mind to shrink the light barrier. Unlike the previous few times, this time, it was a bit more strenuous to use his telekinesis vision. It was so strenuous that his head felt a bit swollen. He decided to just close his eyes and do his best to gather the energy in his body. Fortunately, Little Rascal explained in a timely manner, telekinesis consumes a lot of your stamina. The further or closer the range, the greater the consumption. You're still very weak right now, so controlling a range of 3 meters is indeed very taxing for you. However, hard work will pay off. Sure enough, Ding Meng soon saw that among the billions of surging waves of origin energy, there were many sparkling stars that flickered, jumped, and shone. It was like the Milky Way in the distant night sky. There were many gemstones embedded in them, creating the most beautiful scenery in the night sky. "What is this?" Ding Meng asked. Little Rascal said, "This is the essence of origin energy. It's the purest form of energy. Normal origin ability users can only sense things within 5 meters of you. That depends on luck. However, you can directly sense the essence of origin energy." Ding Meng was finally a bit moved. "What's the cause of this?" Little Rascal proudly said, "This is the power of the K-virus. It has transformed you into a genetic origin. You can skip the step of sensing origin energy and directly absorb it." She was not spouting nonsense. Ding Meng noticed that the beautiful stars were leaving the Milky Way and floating toward him. They then entered his chest, and the raging flames in his chest began to burn again. However, this time, the flames rapidly shrank as soon as they came into contact with the incoming origin energy. It was like water and fire clashing with each other. In the end, the cool water entered his chest, but the origin energy did not disappear. Instead, it turned into waves of energy that spread out to his limbs and bones. This feeling was quite comfortable, but his brain, which was maintaining his telekinesis vision, was becoming more and more bloated. He could not hold on for too long. After absorbing for a while, Ding Ming could only helplessly retract his telekinesis. With a whoosh, the world returned to its original dark state. "How do you feel?" Little Rascal asked. "Not bad." Ding Ming let out a light breath. He felt that the dullness in his brain had dissipated quite a bit. "This K-virus is quite good. Who invented it?" Little Rascal said, "I'm sorry. I don't have enough authority to answer you." "Okay." Ding Ming changed the topic. "Why is there a laboratory in this place?" Little Rascal said, "I'm sorry. I don't have enough authority to answer you." Ding Ming said, "Then what exactly is this place?" Little Rascal said, "I'm sorry. I don't have enough authority to answer you. I only know that this is a laboratory." Ding Ming was going crazy. The entrance was still sealed, and there didn't seem to be any other exits. Getting out now was a big problem. "What exactly do I have to do for you to have enough authority?" Ding Ming couldn't help but ask. Little Rascal replied, "I told you before. Only if you continue to grow stronger will I be able to obtain more authority and use more functions." Ding Ming said, "Are you saying that I'm very weak right now?" "Of course you're very weak." Little Rascal mercilessly commented, "Compared to normal people, you're very strong. However, you're still just an origin ability user." Ding Ming was speechless. He knew that Little Rascal was right. Origin ability users were only people who could sense origin energy. They could help you develop your innate talent and tap into your potential. For example, if your singing was quite good, you could use your origin energy to practice singing. Who knows, one day, you might become a superstar. Of course, Ding Ming definitely didn't have such thoughts. He would only do something stupid like that if he ate too much. In Black Gold Base, if you wanted to survive, don't go singing. Increasing your combat strength and becoming an origin ability user was the only way out. Little Rascal sighed when he saw that Ding Ming was in low spirits. "Ding Ming, even though I don't have enough authority to answer your questions, Xiao AI does. She will definitely be able to answer you." "Oh." Ding Ming's interest was piqued. "Who is Xiao AI?" "Xiao AI and I are a symbiotic AI program. We were created together. To put it simply, Xiao AI is the core AI program." Little Rascal's tone suddenly became somewhat gloomy. "Unfortunately, during the process of modifying you, she died." "Died?" Ding Ming was stunned. Little Rascal replied, "Yes. The backup energy wasn't enough to completely modify you, but in order to modify you as much as possible, she gave the ultimate command to modify you. In the end, all of the energy here was used up, so she naturally died as well." "Wait a minute, you said to modify me as much as possible? Are you saying that I haven't been completely modified yet?" Ding Ming was a little flustered. He had been bragging for so long, but in the end, he was still a defective product? This was too much of a joke. Little Rascal said unhappily, "Of course, the K-virus is very powerful. How could it only allow you to absorb origin energy? Main program number 1 only executed 8,208% of the progress to create the current you. Damn, I really am a defective product." Ding Ming felt like he had been tricked quite a bit. Little Rascal obviously knew what he was thinking and explained, according to main program number 1 settings, if a gene body's completion rate doesn't reach 10%, it will be considered a defective product and will be eliminated. Xiao AI sacrificed herself in order to complete this grand plan. She didn't wait for Ding Ming to speak and continued. "Think about it. You've only reached 8,208%, but you can directly absorb origin energy. How amazing is that?" "That is true." Ding Ming fell into deep thought, but he still felt like something wasn't quite right. "What if I reached 100% completion? What would that be like?" Little Rascal immediately said, "Sorry, I don't have enough authority to answer you." Ding Ming was speechless. Chapter 18. Beep, beep, beep. The current brainwave frequency has reached a critical value. Sir, please end your meditation immediately. Thank you for your cooperation. The alarm from inside the cabin woke Vader up, and the cabin door opened automatically. Vader rubbed his temples and came out of the cabin. If Ding Meng had been present, he would have recognized that the cabin Vader was currently using was the other non-V-shaped medical cabin that he had seen in Vader's private lounge. The full name of this cabin was the Origin Energy Induction Amplification Cabin, or the Induction Cabin for short. The function of the sensing cabin was to help the human body enter a meditative state and sense origin energy through meditation. The stronger the person's willpower, the easier it was for them to enter a meditative state, and the longer they meditated, the easier it was for them to sense origin energy. The best time for humans to become origin energy masters was between the ages of 15 and 35, because this was the peak period when the human brain cells were the most active. It was also the golden period when the body's physical fitness was at its peak. Once the age of 35 passed, it would be very difficult to sense origin energy. Of course, it wasn't that it was impossible to sense origin energy. There were a few people who became origin energy masters after the age of 35, but because they started too late, their achievements were limited. It wasn't that there were no late bloomers, but Vader didn't have such extravagant hopes. He was still painstakingly meditating at the age of 44. His goal was actually quite simple. If he could sense origin energy, he could at least enhance his physical fitness, right? After all, he wasn't a laborer in Black Gold Base. He had a lot of free time, and it was born to stay here. He might as well enter the sensing cabin and try his luck. Sir Vader, you have a new communication message. The system's sweet female voice suddenly rang out. Vader straightened his clothes. Connected. A remote real-time holographic image was immediately projected from the ceiling of the room, and a mighty and huge mirror image quickly stood in front of him. This person's figure was similar to Machine Gun's tower-like body, but he was more muscular and upright than Machine Gun. His face was calm and firm, and there were 3 strange scars on the left side of his face, making him look particularly cold. Coupled with the tight mercenary uniform, this person gave off the feeling that he had been through hundreds of battles and was definitely a powerful person. Sure enough, Vader immediately puffed out his chest. Hello, Grand Marshal. In Black Gold Base, the Grand Marshal was the #1 leader of the mercenary group and was in charge of the entire base. The Grand Marshal didn't even bother to be polite. How's the progress? Vader said. In another 3 hours, the time I gave the machine gun will be up. There should be good news then. The Marshal waved his hand. Give him 2 more days. All right. Vader's heart was filled with astonishment, but he didn't dare to ask why. The commander-in-chief of the base was a man of his word. Fortunately, the Marshal had already taken the initiative to explain, there will be important guests coming in the next 2 days. We need to cooperate with them. Vader was shocked. Grand Marshal, you mean not bad? The general nodded and said in a deep voice, I now officially authorize you to mobilize Team B's forces and let Team 1 go down to the main mine to assist the machine guns. Remember 2 things. You must control the impact within a reasonable range. You must not cause any trouble. Vader puffed out his chest again. Yes. Also, kill anyone who obstructs this operation. After leaving behind these murderous words, the projection immediately retracted, and the mirror image slowly blurred and disappeared. In the middle of the room, Vader stared blankly at the smooth floor. It seemed that the PC-35 area was the real target area. After 6 whole years of digging, he was finally going to dig that thing out. The day of his return was finally entering the countdown. But that wasn't right. Killing without mercy wasn't the general style. 21 hours had already passed, and there was still no news from the machine gun. Could it be that the thing had fallen into the hands of that Ding Meng kid? If it was really in the hands of Ding Meng, then things might be easier to handle. While Vader was making wild guesses, Machine Gun was having a hard time. At this moment, the suspension bridge into the PC-35 area was brightly lit and filled with people. These laborers were all Machine Gun's subordinates. Batch after batch of people went in, but there was still no good news. These people couldn't be blamed for being useless. The PC-35 area was just too big, and the internal passages were dense and numerous. If Little 4 didn't lead the way, it was possible that they wouldn't be able to find it even after 10 days or half a month. Right now, Little Four was curled up like a puddle of mud by the side of the bridge. He couldn't remember how many times he had been beaten up. Every time he was on the brink of death, Machine Gun would order people to feed him healing agents and blood-generating agents. After treatment, they would beat him, and then treat him again. In any case, they would beat him until he told the truth. They would beat him until he couldn't die, even if he wanted to. This kind of cruel torture wasn't something that many people could endure, but Little Four actually managed to endure it. Even Machine Gun found it strange. This kid was usually timid and cowardly, so why was he so stubborn this time? He had obviously underestimated Little Four's intelligence, because Little Four wasn't stupid. From the moment he returned to the surface and was brought down here again, he had a vague idea that Vader and Machine Gun were looking for that place. That place was very likely related to the secret of this base. There were some things that Little Four still understood. Things that you should know would be revealed to you sooner or later, but things that you shouldn't know, you had to die. If you fell into the hands of the mercenaries, it would be fine. At least they wouldn't let you die so easily because you still had some value. But if you fell into the hands of Machine Gun, you would be finished. He would make you wish you were dead. Machine Gun didn't know Little Four well, but Little Four knew him well. He knew that Machine Gun was a man who would do anything to achieve his goals. He didn't know whether Ding Meng was dead or alive, but if he brought Machine Gun to the laboratory now, both he and Ding Meng would end up dead. So no matter what kind of torture he was going through, he wouldn't say a word. The mining area was dark and damp. Not only was the wind blowing from the cave strong, it was also extremely cold. Little Four curled up weakly in the cold wind. He felt that he had lived his life like a mouse. Ever since he was born, he didn't know why he couldn't grow tall. His entire body was covered in strange long hair. Since he was young, people mocked him, and looked down on him. He was like a street rat that everyone wanted to beat up. His deepest memory was when he was 7 years old. There was one time when he was rummaging through the trash. Even the children in the slums didn't let him go. They all peed and pooped on him. They even threw rocks at him. His head was bleeding and his body was covered in cuts and bruises. He almost died that time. In the end, he was sent to a refugee camp. At that time, he was really prepared to die. He would rather die than live like that. But the refugee camp sent him here. He thought that he would have a better life if he left his original world. Who knew that life in the base was even more miserable, merciless, and cold-blooded? Looking back at the past 16 years, he had spent most of his time being humiliated, toyed with, and exploited by others. There was no need to mention that he had received any favors from anyone. Even if there was someone who was even a little bit considerate of him, it would be a luxury. But if there was someone who was considerate of him in his life, it would be Ding Meng. Back then, Ding Meng was just like him. He was lying on the square like a dead dog. When he saw Ding Meng, he saw his past self. That was why he dragged Ding Meng back to the base and saved Ding Meng with half a bottle of healing agent. Ding Meng did not let him down. Over the past month, even if Ding Meng's harvest was not good, he would share half of it with him. Every time he thought of Ding Meng's cold and indifferent face, Little Four felt that his heart was no longer cold. Instead, there was a fierce heat that rushed up. He didn't know what a friend was, and he didn't know what friendship was. He only knew one thing. Ding Meng had done a lot for him, and he had to do something to repay Ding Meng's kindness. Even though his teeth were broken, he did not want to open his mouth. Although his body was in extreme pain, there was no pain in his heart. He only felt gratified. I finally did what I did to Brother Ding. In a trance, Machine Gun walked over and threw a black thing in front of him. You threw this thing away, right? Machine Gun asked coldly. Of course, Xiao Si recognized it. It was the gas gun in Leopard's bag. When he escaped, he had casually thrown it in the tunnel. Machine Gun stared at him, determined not to miss any expression on his face. With your body, you might not even be able to touch Leopard's fingers. Was Ding Meng the one who killed him? Xiao Si's heart skipped a beat. He suddenly remembered that Brother Ding was quite skilled. If Brother Ding was not dead, he might be able to deal with Machine Gun. Of course, if Brother Ding was dead, he would die sooner or later, even if he did not lead the way. He would die if he went, and he would die if he did not go. Since he was going to die anyway, he might as well take a risk. Just like Brother Ding said, perhaps we still have hope. Machine Gun's tone suddenly became gentle. As long as you are willing to lead the way, I can guarantee you that no one can touch a hair on you in Ding Ming. You know very well that Machine Gun's words are absolutely useful down here. Xiaoxi's teeth were broken, and he could not speak. He only stretched out a finger to express his meaning. Let's go. Chapter 19. In the center of the laboratory hall, Ding Ming sat cross-legged on the floor with his eyes closed. His expression was serene and calm. His telekinesis vision had already been opened. Countless origin stars were converging into his body from all directions. Previously, the origin stars had only entered his body through his chest. Now, however, they could converge on his head and chest. Moreover, his telekinesis vision had expanded to a range of 4 meters and could be maintained for 4 hours. After a long time, Ding Ming opened his eyes and felt his body being cleansed by origin energy. This kind of beginner origin energy cultivation method was somewhat clumsy. To put it bluntly, it was just telekinesis guiding and absorbing origin energy, and origin energy supporting the consumption of telekinesis. Of course, Ding Ming had an advantage that ordinary origin ability users couldn't compare to. What he absorbed was origin energy, so there was still a large amount of origin energy stored in his body. It was a bit like swallowing dates. Little Rascal's explanation for this was that this wasn't a long-term method, but it was a primitive accumulation that one had to undergo in the beginner stage. If one wanted to truly make great progress, they had to comprehend cultivation methods, learn martial arts, master combat techniques, and cultivate secret manuals. In short, the current environment was special. There was a big difference between ordinary people and origin ability users. If a beginner origin ability user like you fell into the hands of an ordinary person, then that would be a big joke. Ding Ming stood up and stared at the military knife on the ground, not far away. This was the shadow of the leopard. Even in this pitch-black darkness, the blade still faintly flashed with a layer of cold luster. Of course, with his telekinesis vision, Ding Ming could observe it from all angles without any blind spots. Previously, the life and death battle with the leopard had seemed incomparably tragic and thrilling, but now that he thought about it, it felt like 2 children doing housework. Ding Ming took 2 steps forward and lightly flicked the tip of the knife with the tip of his foot. The light and shadow spun in circles and flew into his hand. If it was before yesterday, Ding Ming would have been able to do this after a long period of practice. However, it was very difficult to control the strength of the knife perfectly. Now that he had become an origin ability user, Ding Ming felt that as long as it was an object nearby, he would be able to accurately control it. Ding Ming stretched out 2 fingers and pinched the blade. Then, with a gentle twist, the military knife made of alloy was bent 90 degrees. The light that the leopard was so proud of turned into scrap metal in Ding Ming's hands. At this moment, Little Rascal said, "Ding Ming, I think there's someone at the entrance." "How did you know?" Ding Ming had actually sensed it as well. He had always been very vigilant, and his telekinetic vision had also been improving along with his cultivation. Now, through his perception, he could vaguely see a group of blurry figures moving in the passage through the thick steel gate. Little Rascal chuckled. "Haha, you've been cultivating for an entire day. Your strength has improved, so of course I've improved as well." Ding Ming didn't respond to her question. Instead, he muttered to himself, "If there's someone up there who's the first to find this place, then it's definitely Machine Gun." Little Rascal didn't understand. "Why?" Ding Ming said, "Because Machine Gun is the most familiar with this place, and only his subordinates have a drill torch." Little Rascal said, "According to my calculations, the efficiency of the worker's drill torch is as high as 79%. The laboratory door is made of 4-elemental alloy, so the corrosion rate is 83%. They won't have a problem coming in." "Then how long will it take for them to get in?" Ding Ming asked with a frown. There was nowhere to hide in this laboratory hall. Little Rascal was already counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2. When she counted to 1, the steel gate suddenly collapsed. 8 or 9 searchlights shone in, followed by a large group of people. Machine Gun was a little surprised to see Ding Ming standing straight in the middle of the hall. There had been no news of Leopard since yesterday, and none of his brothers in the mine had seen him either. Machine Gun knew that Leopard had most likely been killed by Ding Ming. Now that Ding Ming was standing there, perfectly fine, Machine Gun had no choice but to reevaluate this person. He no longer treated Ding Ming as a newcomer. Newcomers didn't have the guts or the skills to do such a thing. However, when Ding Ming saw Machine Gun, a fiery rage rose in his heart. This was because he saw Little Four lying on the ground in a mangled mess of flesh and blood. He looked just like the child, numbered 4033, at the square the other day. Ding Ming used his telekinesis vision to check on Little Four. He found that Little Four was in a very bad condition. His breathing was already very weak. Little Rascal said, "Ding Ming, Little Four is now 78% weak. 13 teeth on both sides of his mouth are missing. 9 ribs of his chest are broken. His left calf is 67% fractured, and 3 toes on his right foot are shattered." Ding Ming stopped listening because he saw Little Four sneak a glance at him. Little Four nodded slightly, and then closed his eyes weakly. This look was enough to explain a lot. Little Four had not come down for a long time because Machine Gun and his gang were looking for Ding Ming everywhere. Little Four had already done his best to buy time for himself to recover. Ding Ming took a deep breath and took 2 steps forward. He pointed at Little Four's body and asked everyone, "Who did this?" Machine Gun and the others looked at each other in shock. Ding Ming said coldly, "I'll ask you one more time. Who did this?" "Uh-huh." Everyone suddenly burst into laughter. Some of them were even holding their stomachs as they laughed. Ding Ming said with a sullen face, "This is not funny." A bare-chested, bald-head man walked out from the crowd. He was very muscular, and there was a strange tattoo of a wolf's head on his chest. It was obvious that he was a cruel person. You probably don't know why everyone is laughing at you. The bald-head man had a mocking smile on his face. "Because you're so good at acting. Even I almost thought that you were a big boss." "Ha ha." Ding Ming was cold and expressionless. "I know you. You're Wild Wolf. You're Machine Gun's right-hand man." "Ha ha 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 ha." Wild Wolf raised his head and laughed again. "You have some eyes. You actually know Master Wolf." He then pointed at Xiao Si, who was curled up in the corner, and said arrogantly, "Kid, open your dog eyes and look carefully. It was your Master Wolf who did this. I'm already giving you face by taking care of this piece of trash. You come over, or I come over. It's your choice. How do you want to die?" After that, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and stood proudly with his chin raised high. He looked like he didn't take Ding Ming seriously at all. "Very good." Ding Ming was still expressionless, and his tone was still calm. "I also want to tell you something." Wild Wolf laughed disdainfully. "What bullsh asterisk tea do you have? Hurry up and tell me." Ding Ming's tone suddenly became cold. "You're going to be in trouble soon." Before he could finish his sentence in Wild Wolf's eyes, Ding Ming's figure suddenly became blurry. It was just like the holographic projection a second before it disappeared. Not good. Wolf felt the danger, but he had no way to dodge. In the next second, Ding Ming was already in front of him. He did not even see how Ding Ming attacked. All he felt was an earth-shattering blow. He did not feel the second blow at all. He did not even feel any pain. Then he was sent flying. Only when he hit a control panel did he realize that his jaw and upper jaw were completely dislocated. His teeth were dripping with blood as they fell to the ground one by one. Only then did he feel fear. A kind of fear that could make a person go crazy and collapse surge from the bottom of his heart. He suddenly cried out, "Whoa!" This cry was really like a wild wolf in the wilderness whose throat was being cut. The laughter in the surroundings stopped abruptly, and the entire hall became deathly quiet. Only the howling of the wild wolves could be heard echoing in the darkness. Hearing this cry, everyone felt as if their throats were being strangled. Even their breathing stopped. What frightened them even more was Ding Ming's cold and indifferent voice. Ding Ming stared at Wild Wolf and said word by word, "I won't let you die. I'll make you wish you were dead." Machine Gun usually liked to say this sentence, and it did not matter if you heard it too much. But when it came from Ding Meng's mouth, it was particularly terrifying. Chapter 20. The hall was still the same, but no one dared to laugh at this laborer who had only been here for less than 2 months. "You're not a laborer in this place." Machine Gun suddenly spoke. He looked at Ding Meng with a very calm gaze. Definitely not. No one else had seen Ding Meng's attack clearly, but he had. Ding Meng had used the carp leaping over the dragon gate, backhand chop, he had used to fight the leopard the day before. But this time, his speed was so fast that ordinary people could not see him at all. That was why he had created that blurry illusion in the wild wolf's eyes. Although the origin energy cleansing brought about comprehensive changes to the body, the current elementary primitive accumulation could only bring about explosive strength and speed. However, the backhand chop was the move Ding Meng was most proficient in. It could barely be considered a martial arts technique. Even so, in Machine Gun's eyes, it was still quite shocking. The wild wolf was stronger than the leopard, but not much weaker than Machine Gun. Machine Gun was not completely confident that he could defeat Ding Meng. At this moment, Ding Meng turned his head. "What are you trying to say?" Machine Gun took 2 steps forward, and finally he said something shocking. "Do you know where this place is?" Ding Meng stared at him. "Do you know where this is?" Machine Gun sighed. "I know, but I don't know." His words were really hard to understand, so Ding Meng could only wait for him to continue. "I came to this place 6 years ago, and I've experienced at least 20 accidents, big and small. If I had to die, I would have died a long time ago." Ding Meng did not say anything. He knew that Machine Gun had not simply relied on luck to survive in this damn place for 6 years. Machine Gun sighed, which was rare. "Do you know why I'm still alive?" Ding Meng stared at him. "Maybe it's because someone doesn't want you to die." Pain flashed through Machine Gun's eyes, but then he cast a look of admiration at Ding Meng. He did not expect Ding Meng to be able to think of this. Machine Gun took out a palm-sized metal storage container from his bag. The port emitted rays of light, and a 3-dimensional virtual map immediately appeared in the hall, emitting a faint blue light. "What is this?" Ding Meng noticed that the map was made up of countless complicated curves, and many places were marked with red, green, and white dots. Machine Gun said, "This is the map of the main mine. I can guarantee that the map above is not as detailed as this one." The map as a whole looked like a gourd buried in the ground. The mouth of the gourd was the sinkhole in the ground, and the curved lines were the excavated tunnels. From the sinkhole down, countless tunnels were expanding downward in all kinds of strange trajectories. Ding Meng immediately communicated with Little Rascal telepathically. How reliable are his words? Little Rascal said his heart rate is normal, 56 beats per minute, and his breathing is steady, 9 beats per minute. His eyes haven't changed much. So far, his facial expression has shown a total of 14 different expressions, and his body movements have only shown 5. According to my calculations, the chance of him lying is less than 7%, so his credibility is very high. Machine Gun pointed at the map and explained, "The red dots on this map are the coordinates that are very difficult to dig through. Basically, they're dead zones. The white dots are the daily mining sites and resting areas." Following his finger, Ding Meng noticed that most of the red dots were scattered around the edges of the gourd. The white dots, which are the most numerous, were located in the middle, and the green dots were the least numerous. Most of them were buried at the bottom of the gourd and were scattered around. Machine Gun changed the topic. "In the past 2 years, a strange virus has suddenly appeared down here. Even the V-shaped medical pod is unable to treat it." He suddenly pointed at Little Four. It's the virus in his body. Even though he did not know what kind of virus it was, Ding Meng knew that it was a mutated version of the K virus. "These green dots are the source of the virus?" Ding Meng asked. Machine Gun said, "That's right. They're all pools like the ones outside. Every pool has those tentacle monsters. That's the real reason why the mercenaries up there don't dare to come down so easily." Ding Meng said, But that doesn't seem to explain the existence of this place. What he said made sense. It was normal for monsters to be buried underground. They might be primitive creatures, but the laboratory was different. It was definitely man-made. Machine Gun said, 6 years ago, when I came to the base, it wasn't like this. There were wounded mercenaries being rescued from the surface. Their situation was exactly the same as Little Four's. This time, not only was Ding Ming shocked, even Machine Gun subordinates were shocked. No one knew about this. Ding Ming said hesitantly, "You're saying that the outer walls of the base are there to stop the monsters outside?" Machine Gun said, "Not entirely. Because in the past 4 years, there hasn't been any large-scale battles inside or outside the base." He paused for a moment before continuing. "My guess is that this terrifying virus used to exist outside, but not underground. But over the past few years, the virus has slowly seeped into the ground." This guess was undoubtedly very reasonable. The virus might be slowly eating away at the base. But what did not make sense was that the assault regiment definitely knew about the virus, but the commander and the others clearly knew about it. So why were they still digging in this dangerous place for so many years? Machine Gun finally said something shocking. The commander and the others might not be trying to find a virus. If they wanted to find it, they would have found it a long time ago. What they're really trying to find is how the virus is created and how it works. Little Rascal suddenly said, "He's right. The K-virus is harmful to most living creatures, but you're a special case. The manufacturing principle behind it is extremely complicated. Once someone masters it, it's equivalent to them possessing an advanced genetic weapon." Ding Ming suddenly felt that a lot of things that he could not figure out before were slowly starting to make sense. However, he still had a vague feeling that things were not as simple as they seemed. "From your tone, it sounds like you've been outside the base." "I have." Machine Gun was expressionless. "I dare say that among all of us coolies, I'm the only one who's still alive after going outside." Everyone's expressions changed. Ding Ming stared at him. "Then why didn't you escape?" Machine Gun said calmly, "I couldn't escape." Ding Ming asked why. Machine Gun said, "Is it because you've never seen the outside world before?" Ding Ming could not help but ask, "What kind of world is it like outside?" Machine Gun had a blank expression on his face. His gaze also seemed very empty. He muttered with a sigh, "I can't describe what the outside world is like. I can see everything, but I can't see anything. But there's one thing I'm sure of, and that's that there's absolutely no way to escape." This time, not only did Ding Ming find it strange, even Little Rascal could not explain it. Ding Ming suddenly sighed. "I kind of understand what you're trying to say now. You want to work with me?" There was a look of admiration in Machine Gun's eyes again. It's always fun to deal with smart people. He was not an idiot. He had probably figured out the whole situation a long time ago. Black Gold Base was actually surrounded by the mutated virus. There was no way to escape above ground, and there was no way to escape underground. So, the end result was that everyone was waiting to die here. But suddenly, Ding Ming and Little Rascal discovered this underground experiment hall. Then, a new hope appeared. There might be a way out deep underground. Instead of killing each other here, it was better to work together to find a way out. No matter how big the world was, nothing was more important than one's own life. If one had not stayed in Black Gold Base, one would not understand how luxurious it was to be able to live safely. Little Rascal suddenly said, "Ding Ming, agree to his request. The energy drill torch they have has been modified. It can pierce through quaternary steel plates. If they use the original digging method, the experiment hall has an area of 6,852 square meters. Let me do some calculations. There's a 60% chance that they can find a way out within 2 hours. If there's enough time, this probability will increase." Hearing the word way out, Ding Ming could not help but feel a rush of excitement. But he knew that the more excited he was, the more he could not be careless. Machine Gun was not a kind person, and caution was the key to success. So he said, "I can work with you, but I have a condition." Machine Gun's attitude immediately became respectful. "Please speak." Chapter 21. The modified drill welding torch that Little Rascal was referring to was actually a simple weapon. It looked like a black steel pipe as thick as an arm, but it had a 6-leaf pusher launcher installed at the front end, and the flames it shot out were all crystal flames. Ordinary flames had no effect on alloys, but the crystal flames created by crystal flames could easily cut through alloy steel plates below for you on. If there was enough energy, it could even cut through higher-grade alloys. The tip of the drill welding torch had been modified into an 8-leaf rotary type. Logically speaking, laborers were absolutely not allowed to have such things. It was obvious that this was Machine Gun's personal stash. He would only use it at a critical moment. Clearly, this guy had come prepared. At this moment, 8 of his subordinates were poking around the hall with their welding torches, trying to find a gap or a flaw. Ding Ming had gathered all of these people's belongings together, so he had no choice but to be cautious. From this point of view, he also admired Machine Gun a little. Machine Gun had actually taken off his baggage and handed it to him. It was a show of sincerity. The baggage in this place was the lifeblood of every laborer. However, Ding Ming was no longer interested in finding out what was inside. He poured a large amount of nutrient solution, healing agent, blood-generating agent, and steel mixture into Little Four's mouth. After about 5 minutes, Little Four's body gradually began to recover. However, the teeth that had been knocked out could not be recovered by these alone. He had to rely on the medical pod to regenerate them. Regardless, Little Four's life was saved. When Little Four recovered, he held Ding Ming's hand tightly and said in a muffled and trembling voice, "Brother Ding," I said, "I will definitely come back." Ding Ming felt that the hand holding him was stronger than usual. It was so strong that it even trembled a little. He knew that Little Four had suffered so much just to fulfill his promise. It was this person who looked like a mouse that lived like a real person instead of those beasts around him. Ding Ming suddenly felt his body heat up. There was an inexplicable emotion rippling in his chest. He did not know why, but recently he realized that his heart was not as hard as it used to be. He did not know whether this was a good or bad situation. Ding Ming looked at him and said seriously, "Shall see. You'd better speak less now. When the time comes, we'll go out together. Trust me." "Yes." Little Four nodded vigorously. At this moment, Little Rascal jumped out and said, "Ding Ming, I've discovered a problem." Ding Ming asked, "What's the problem?" Little Rascal giggled and replied, "You should be more into men, right?" Ding Ming was helpless against Little Rascal's logic. He could not help but ask, "Is this also part of your calculations?" "Of course." Little Rascal said proudly, "From the perspective of behavioral science, the birth of human emotions is an extension of a sense of familiarity. I detected that your emotional fluctuations were a little strong just now, especially when you were facing Little Four. Your emotional fluctuations reached 38%, so I calculated that the probability of you liking men is currently above 50%. Ding Ming sighed. "If I want to refute your point of view, I'm afraid I have no basis," Little Rascal asked in return. "Could it be that you really don't like women?" Ding Ming said, "I would like to, but the prerequisite is that there must be a woman." Little Rascal said, "Are there no heterosexual humans in this base?" Ding Ming said, "In any case, I've never seen one before." His word would have been fine in the past, but he was wrong this time. At the same time, in the sky above Black Gold Base, a transport ship cut across the sky, passed through the plaza, and slowly landed in the center of the base. On the rooftop of the command center, the marshal was personally leading a group of mercenaries to welcome the arrival of the transport ship. This mystic bird transport ship looked like a light bird, especially suitable for flying at low altitudes and passing through narrow and complicated areas. At this moment, after the transport ship steadily stopped on the rooftop, the marshal invader quickly went up to welcome it. A woman appeared at the cabin door, and this was a real woman. She was dressed in a black business suit with a pair of high heels that accentuated her impressive curves. However, this image was completely out of place with this place, and it was obvious that she wasn't from this place. She had a layer of light makeup on her face, and her black hair was tied up behind her head. The sunglasses on the bridge of her nose covered half of her face, and judging from the remaining half of her face, this woman shouldn't be the type with bad looks. It was just that her expression was extremely indifferent, which gave her a sense of cold elegance. The marshal had already come up to welcome her. "Miss Julie, we're honored by your presence. Please forgive us for not going out to meet you." Julie didn't respond to the marshal's respect and politeness at all. Instead, she went straight to the point. "What's the current situation? The operation has already begun. Our men are on the way." Vader explained as he activated the wristwatch. The screen displayed a first-person view of a person running rapidly through the narrow and damp tunnel of the mining area. Julie stopped in her tracks, and her tone suddenly became somewhat cold. "Just one person?" The marshal hurriedly came up to explain. "The incident happened so suddenly that we had to urgently send out our vanguard to investigate. The main force is following behind. Miss Julie, please don't worry. Everything is under our control. It won't delay the important matters." Julie's expression eased slightly, but her tone was still cold. "The higher-ups already know about the information you sent back. I was originally on my way to the K2 galaxy for an important matter, but I happened to pass by this area, so the higher-ups assigned me to handle this matter on your behalf. You should understand what the higher-ups mean, right?" The marshal and Vader nodded at the same time. Since the higher-ups had assigned her, it meant that this matter had to be handled in a low-key manner. Julie continued, "It's not easy for you guys either. Your regiment has cooperated with us for many years, and I know that you guys have been working very hard here. However, if this matter succeeds, our cooperation will be considered to have ended satisfactorily. Therefore, this matter not only has to be low-key, it has to be successful. This is everyone's painstaking effort over the years." Vader immediately expressed his stance. "Miss Julie, please don't worry. If necessary, I will personally go down to investigate." Julie glanced at him and said coldly, "I hope it's best not to alarm Officer Vader. That would be the most ideal outcome." Vader felt an inexplicable sense of uneasiness. The marshal once again smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Miss Julie, please don't worry too much. The person leading the team this time is an extremely experienced soldier. With his ability, he can handle any situation." Julie was expressionless. "Then I'll count on the marshal's auspicious words." The marshal's posture was rather humble as he hurriedly bent over and extended his hand. Miss Julie must have had a hard time coming from afar. The VIP lounge has already been prepared. Miss Julie, please give us some face. This way, please. Chapter 22. 1, 2, 3. As everyone shouted, a wall in the southern corner of the laboratory hall was finally pried open. The thick alloy steel plate collapsed with a boom, revealing a dark tunnel. The moment it fell, a similar situation occurred. An unbearable heat wave gushed out of the tunnel with a whoosh. It was so hot that everyone felt like they were about to spit fire. This kind of heat wave was unbearable for others, but for Ding Ming, it was unusually comfortable. He took a deep breath of the heat wave and felt his limbs and bones cool down. At the same time, he activated his telekinesis vision. The light waves surged into the tunnel like a tide. Ding Ming could see clearly that there were two small paths at the end of the tunnel. There really was another way out of the laboratory hall, but he could not sense it any further. After all, his strength was limited. At this moment, Little Rascal suddenly reported, "Ding Ming, I've detected a large amount of technological energy fluctuations coming from the mining area." Technological energy? Ding Ming was stunned. "This is bad. It's very likely that the mercenaries from above have found us." Little Rascal said, "They'll arrive here in 6 minutes and 35 seconds. This time, Ding Ming did not answer her. Even he could see that Machine Gun and the others did not enter the tunnel immediately. Instead, they turned around and stood in a row with their welding torches, looking at him maliciously. These people were standing in a very clever way. They looked like a fan, but intentionally or otherwise, they were blocking the tunnel entrance. Ding Ming's heart sank. After Leopard, Machine Gun had taught him another lesson. He was still young. How could a young person like him easily guess a person's heart? It was true that Machine Gun wanted to find a way out, but how could Machine Gun really work with him? Machine Gun's goal was to trap him here after finding a way out and then wait for the mercenaries to come and take care of him. Machine Gun was a cunning old fox. The reason he could survive in this place unscathed for 6 years was because he had the support of the mercenaries on the surface. The person he should be working with should be the marshal. Ding Ming caught on a little too late. Machine Gun looked at him with a half smile. "We have to thank you and shall see. Without you, we wouldn't have found this place, even in our dreams." Ding Ming pondered and said, "Have you reached an agreement with the marshal that once you help him find this place, he will let you go?" Machine Gun finally smiled. "You shouldn't have asked that." Ding Ming asked, "Then why did you show me the map of the mine before?" Machine Gun said proudly, "Because I know that only by telling the truth can I keep someone like you here." Hearing this, Ding Ming did not react, but Little Rascal was furious. "This bastard actually lied to us. Ding Ming, don't hold back this time. You must eliminate them." At the end of the day, she was just an AI program. She could analyze data and tell if someone was telling the truth or not, but she could never calculate the true thoughts of a human being. The human heart was the most difficult thing to guess. Ding Ming did not need her to remind him. He knew that if he did not eliminate this group of people in front of him now, the chances of him escaping were basically zero. These laborers were not a threat to him, but the drill welding gun was still lethal to him. Time was of the essence, so Ding Ming did not have time to think. He charged forward with a swoosh and slashed at the laborers on the far right of the group with a backhand chop. It was fine if he did not make a move, but once he made a move, he had to defeat his opponent. This was the principle he had always followed. With the strength of the laborers, there was no way they could react in time. All of this was as easy as cutting through a piece of tofu. One of them fell to the ground and coughed up blood. Before the drill welding gun in his hand could fall to the ground, Ding Ming swept his leg across the air. The drill welding gun, which was spewing out crystal flames, whizzed forward in a circle. The 6 laborers who had rushed forward were caught off guard and were swept in the face by the crystal flames. A terrifying scene unfolded. The 6 of them fell to the ground, howling in pain. They did not even have time to cover their faces. The blue flames produced by the crystal flames instantly spread throughout their bodies like demonic flames from hell. In just a few seconds, only 6 piles of bones were left on the ground. Seeing that Ding Ming had eliminated 7 people in an instant, the remaining laborers threw away the drill welding gun in his hand and ran away without even thinking. Halfway through running, he felt a strong force. His vision tilted, and he was sent flying. Machine Gun punched him in the stomach, kicked him in the ankle, and lifted him up with both hands to throw him at Ding Ming. This series of actions was very smooth, but Machine Gun did not expect to hurt Ding Ming. He only wanted to slow down Ding Ming's momentum. This was because Ding Ming was simply too fast, so fast that even he was shocked. As expected, Ding Ming's left hand chopped at the neck of the flying laborer. The laborer's body immediately went limp, and he curled up into a ball and fell to the ground. When he looked up again, he saw that the old Fox Machine Gun was also running back. His goal was not to escape, but to run toward Little Four. Not good. This time, Ding Ming charged at Machine Gun with all his strength. He jumped into the air, his body like a flying fish, and his hand chopped out like a meteor. "Watch out!" Little Rascal shouted at the critical moment. Machine Gun suddenly stopped. Without even turning his head, his left hand made a hidden backward movement. A cold light shot out from under his ribs at an incredible angle. This was clearly the light of a sharp weapon. Ding Ming was shocked. Machine Gun's move was very insidious. If he forced a cut, the sharp weapon would definitely pierce his chest first. It was as if he was delivering himself to the enemy's knife. In this critical moment, Ding Ming decisively pulled back his right hand. His body shrank back, and his whole body leaned back. The cold light slid past the bridge of his nose, and he could even feel the cold air of the sharp weapon. At the same time, Machine Gun was also shocked. Ding Meng had actually slid past his crotch. This difficult move was not something an ordinary person could do. When he turned around again, he found that Ding Meng was already in front of Little Four, protecting him. Ding Meng was coldly staring at him. Machine Gun suddenly discovered that Ding Meng's body seemed to be wrapped in a layer of constantly twisting air. Even his image was somewhat blurry. At this moment, he couldn't help but cry out in alarm. You're an Origin energy user? Hearing this, Ding Meng's killing intent was truly aroused. He had never liked killing. He was only forced to act in self-defense. However, when he used all his strength just now, Machine Gun had seen through it. A cold, killing intent that he hadn't felt in a long time grew in his heart. He absolutely couldn't let the people in the base know about his secret. If this secret was leaked, the mercenaries would use all the power in the base to hunt him down. The commander wouldn't let anything that could threaten the mercenaries live. Machine Gun's face suddenly revealed a horrified expression. Don't tell me you've already obtained the memory chip? No one answered his question. The one who answered him was Ding Meng, who rushed over like a whirlwind. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of him. Chapter 23. Just as Ding Meng was about to launch his counterattack, there was a loud bang in the middle of the hall without any warning. A bright light shone from the center of the hall. The light was so bright that the human eye could not withstand it. Littlefoot could only see a bright light in front of his eyes. He could not see anything, and his head was dizzy. He could not help but cover his eyes and fall to the ground. This thing was none other than one of the mercenaries' tactical equipment, the condensed energy amplification dazzle bullet. It was a light, non-lethal weapon that used strong light to obstruct the target's vision. Machine Gun was really cunning. He pretended to be shocked, but in reality, he had secretly turned on the dazzle bullet's switch with his other hand and secretly threw it behind himself. The moment the bullet exploded, the dagger in his hand had already slashed out. It was not a real alloy dagger, but its sharpness was no worse than an alloy dagger. Just like Leopard's lightsaber, it was also his trump card. He would not use it unless he was in a critical situation. But his tricks were nothing in front of Ding Meng. If his telekinetic vision could be blinded by a small dazzle bullet, then an Origin ability user would be too weak to withstand a single blow. The dagger that was slashing forward suddenly stopped in midair because the T-shaped claw blade had arrived first. The curved blade hooked onto Machine Gun's inner wrist bone like lightning. Machine Gun suddenly felt a heart-wrenching pain from his wrist. He could not hold onto the dagger at all, and it fell to the ground in an instant. There was a crisp sound like a cloth being torn apart. The claw blade did not stop. It went along his arm, cutting through the tendons of his forearm, the tendons of his elbow, his biceps, his shoulder blade. It completely cut his arm open, and finally, it stabbed into his neck. Machine Gun's eyeballs bulged out like a dead fish. He was in the same situation as Leopard. Even now, he still could not believe that this was real. But he was in a worse state than Leopard. At least Leopard could clearly see the thing in Ding Meng's hand, but he could not see anything. Ding Meng was never one to beat around the bush when dealing with his enemies. Before Machine Gun could finish his sentence, Ding Meng decisively pulled back his hand. With another sharp sound, Machine Gun's neck was completely cut open. His corpse fell backward, spraying blood like rain. In the past 6 years, his life had indeed not been easy, but his death had been extremely easy. He had not shown any mercy to the other laborers, but he had never imagined that one day he would actually die in the hands of a laborer. Moreover, he had been mercilessly killed. Only then did Little Four's vision return to normal. He stared at the corpse on the ground in shock. He was even more shocked than Machine Gun Leopard and the others, and even more in disbelief. Brother Ding, Shao Si asked while trembling, "Are you really an Esper?" "Yes." After a moment of silence, Ding Meng finally admitted. He did not want to hide anything from Shao Si. Little Four's eyes lit up, but then suddenly dimmed, as if he wanted to say something, but was unable to open his mouth. Ding Meng suddenly said, "Shao Si, wait for me at the exit. We'll leave together later." "Brother Ding, what about you?" Little Four asked anxiously. Ding Meng did not have time to answer. His eyes were fixed on the door of a laboratory, and the sonorous sound of mechanical footsteps could be heard coming from the corridor. It was not that he did not want to escape, but he knew that he could not escape now. Since Machine Gun Leopard had suddenly turned against him, it meant that the mercenaries were about to arrive. However, Ding Meng believed that the main force would not be able to arrive so quickly. He guessed that the more powerful leaders would be coming. If he escaped through the exit corridor now, they would immediately be on his tail. Instead of wasting his energy on escaping, it was better to stay where he was and deal with the pursuers first. A day ago, Ding Meng definitely did not have this kind of confidence. However, after absorbing the essence for a day, Ding Meng was confident that he was not afraid of any ordinary person in the base. However, he still underestimated the determination of the ambush mercenaries because what appeared at the exit was a single power armor. It was a type of combat armor made of low-grade alloy and equipped with various tactical weapons and intelligence systems. It was like a layer of steel armor. If an ordinary person was equipped with it, their combat power would increase tremendously. Cha! 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 The newcomer slowly took a few steps forward, as if he was also shocked by the sight of the corpses on the ground. Ding Meng looked through the defensive light glass layer in the center of the armor and found that the person who was equipped with this thing was Sadler. He was no stranger to Sadler. He had seen that whip many times. Not only did he know how ruthless and terrifying Sadler was, but he also knew that Sadler was actually Vader's direct subordinate. If there were no special circumstances, Vader would not let Sadler go out easily. However, since Sadler had appeared here, Ding Meng knew that this was not a small matter. Little Rascal's voice suddenly rang out. Ding Meng, he has an ion scanning eye on his shoulder. He must be maintaining a signal transmission with the outside world. If you really want to fight with him, you must find a way to destroy it. Otherwise, we will be in big trouble. Little Rascal's judgment was not wrong. At this moment, in the command center hall on the ground, Julie, the general, and Vader were all sitting on the sofa. The large virtual screen in front of them showed Sadler's first-person perspective. Through the ion scanning eye, they could see the scene in real time. When he saw the body of the machine gun, the general's face sank. He knew the weight of the machine gun very well. It was not that there were no workers who could kill the machine gun, but to cut open the machine gun's throat in such a strange and cruel way, he really could not think of anyone who could do it. This Ding Meng is strange. The general picked up the communicator and gave Sadler an order. Switch to conventional weapons mode. Kill anyone who resists on the spot. The weapons used by the mercenaries in the base were usually in the braking mode. The purpose of this was to make people lose their ability to move, so the bullets were usually needle-type injections. To put it simply, the guns fired syringes that could quickly knock out the workers. The slightly upgraded ones were energy chains, electric chains, net chains, and so on. They did not have any fatal lethality. However, the conventional weapons mode was different. They were all pure energy bullets. Normal people would die if they came into contact with them. Sure enough, Sadler slowly raised a large and slender multifunctional standard photoelectric gun on his arm. He stared at Ding Meng and said, 8028, I will give you 3 chances. Hand over the item, and the base will not only guarantee your safety, but will also treat you well. Ding Meng appeared very calm. Memory chip? Sadler said, hand it over. You can raise any request you have. The base will consider your legitimate requests. Ding Meng said without hesitation, if I hand it over, will the general allow me to leave the base safely? Sadler said, no problem. The general can hear your request right now. He has already agreed to it. Okay. Ding Meng immediately pointed at the body of the machine gun on the ground. The memory chip is on him. Hearing this, the head of the armor immediately lowered slightly. The probe at the top began to emit distorted rays and began to scan the body. Almost at the same time, Ding Meng suddenly kicked out. The drill torch under his feet flew toward Sadler's face like a missile. Sadler was still able to react, even though he had been tricked. He quickly raised his photoelectric gun, and a string of bead-like energy shot out from the muzzle. The bullets hit the drill welding gun with a loud bang, and the drill welding gun was smashed into pieces. A dazzling ball of light instantly exploded, and the center of the hall was set ablaze with a raging fire. Chapter 24. When the drill torch exploded violently, the screen in the command hall also showed a dazzling flame. However, 5 seconds later, the transmission signal on the screen was cut off with a click, replaced by countless jumping pockmarks. "What's going on?" The marshal immediately reprimanded the staff at the control panel. There's no point in asking him. Julie, who was sitting on the sofa, spoke unhurriedly. "If my guess is correct, that laborer took advantage of the interval between the explosions to sneak behind your subordinate and destroy his ion-scanning eye. The marshal and Vader were instantly flabbergasted. Julie said indifferently, "Since that laborer can kick away such a cumbersome drill torch, then he must have the strength to go around to the back of your subordinate. Who knows, he might have already cut off the battery in the back seat. If your subordinate wants to live, it's best to remove the armor." She seemed to be talking to herself, but in fact, she was questioning the two managers. When did such a powerful person appear among the laborers of Black Gold Base? Vader had already stood up and said respectfully, "Miss Julie, I can guarantee that this Ding Meng is definitely an ordinary laborer." Julie simply ignored his feeble explanation. "Let's take a look at this person's details." The wristwatch lit up again, and the information on it was refreshed line by line. Name, Ding Meng. Gender, male. Age, 20 years old. Serial number, F3-8028. Origin, Linda Department. Top 45, Camp 88, NF District of the Bramble Planet. Delivery ship, Shinda Aerospace Company, Limited 98. Transport ship 566B. Acceptance location, Black Gold Base. Recipient. Rating Mercenary Corps Number 8. Events, none. When he saw that the row of information on the event column was actually none, Vader finally realized what he had overlooked. The event column usually recorded the laborer's important past experiences. Take the machine gun as an example. Robbery, arrest, trial, prison break, rearrest, involvement in a murder in prison. A series of important events were accurately recorded by the relevant organizations of the Federation. Especially the dark history, it was impossible to erase it even if you wanted to. As long as it was within the jurisdiction of the Federation, not to mention workers, as long as it was an individual, there would be a record in his event column. Of course, there were also a small number of workers whose event columns were completely blank. Those people were the mentally handicapped people who were sent to the rehabilitation base the moment they were born. Was this Ding Meng a mentally handicapped person? All the signs indicated that Ding Meng was not a criminal, but had a suspicious background. Julie also stood up slowly and said with a solemn expression, "I actually hope that this Ding Meng has deliberately concealed his background." The marshal hesitated and said, "Miss Julie, do you mean Ding Meng is really an ordinary laborer?" Julie turned her head and stared at Vader. "Then we'll have to ask Officer Vader if Ding Meng has shown any unusual behavior during his stay here. For example, did Ding Meng have such good skills before?" "Absolutely not," Vader replied resolutely. Julie continued to ask, "Are you sure?" Vader said, "I'm sure. At least before yesterday, I've never seen this person have such explosive power." He seemed to feel that this explanation was somewhat feeble, so he simply changed to a more easy-to-understand way of saying, "Miss Julie, if there's anyone among all the workers here who can take out machine guns, leopards, and wolves in one go, I can guarantee that there's absolutely no one." Julie didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be deep in thought. After a while, she actually took off her sunglasses slowly, revealing a beautiful face. Usually, Vader would feel both physically and mentally happy when he saw such a face. But now, when he saw Julie's slow and solemn action, he only felt his heart sink continuously. Julie stared at him. "Officer Vader, can I understand it this way? Before yesterday, Ding Meng was just an ordinary laborer. But after seeing him today, Did he suddenly change? Did his skills become better? Perhaps even a little too good? Yes, that's exactly what happened. Vader knew that something was wrong, but he still braced himself and answered honestly. Julie's pupils suddenly contracted. Allow me to tell you a terrifying truth. This Ding Meng went from an ordinary person to an origin ability user in a single day. What? Vader was completely shocked. He had experienced how difficult it was for an ordinary person to transform into an origin ability user. One had to start training from a young age. Whether it was breathing exercises or meditating, all of these required a long period of bitter training. Secondly, physical training was an extremely arduous process. Without a strong physical fitness, one couldn't even think about origin ability. Even becoming an ordinary human soldier was just a dream. In addition to these requirements, the geniuses of the Federation also needed to spend a large amount of money to purchase supplementary drugs and external stimuli. Only then could they be considered to have completed all the necessary conditions for sensing. The most crucial point was whether or not one could truly sense the existence of origin ability. Some people were lucky enough to break through and become an origin ability user, while others were unable to break through for the rest of their lives. The coincidences and mysteries of the skills involved couldn't be explained in a few words. Vader was an example. He was 44 years old this year, but he was still working hard. Sometimes he felt that he was very close to achieving origin ability, but he just couldn't break through that layer of indistinct barrier. If someone were to tell him that an ordinary person could cross this barrier in a single day, he wouldn't believe it even if he was beaten to death. That's impossible. The Marshal's expression also became serious. He knew best what it meant for an origin ability user to appear in the base. It could very well be a direct threat to him. Miss Julie, could this be the effect of the virus? Julie shook her head, her expression somewhat blank. Based on the past monitoring data, there's currently no evidence or example that the virus can cause this kind of result. At least in theory, there isn't any. The side effects are actually more severe, but this Ding Meng is definitely an origin ability user. At least, I can't be wrong about this. Her confidence was based on Ding Meng's kick to Sadler. A modified welding torch weighed at least 100 kilograms. A casual kick could make it shoot out like a cannonball. An ordinary person really couldn't do this. Even many beginner origin ability users would find it difficult to do so. The Marshal and Vader weren't sure if Julie was wrong about this, but they were very clear about one thing. A new clue had been unearthed underground, and Ding Meng was one of the excavators. This was definitely related to him. The Marshal gritted his teeth. It doesn't matter. Group B's first team has already gone down. With Sadler there, this Ding Meng won't be able to escape. I want to see what kind of shameful things he has on him. Julie shook her head and sighed. Sir, you're jumping to conclusions too early. If the main team had gone down too late, I'm afraid your subordinates would have already died at Ding Meng's hands. The Marshal shook his head. That's not necessarily true. I don't care if he's an origin ability user or not. In any case, the people of our regiment aren't as weak as you think. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.